We at Caribbean Export are delighted to be here today and to have the chance to engage with you during this important webinar under the theme EU-CARIFORUM EPA, Enhancing Reciprocal Trade and Deepening Regional Integration. I am really delighted with the excellent response. And as of yesterday, we had 458 participants from 51 countries, including, as I noted earlier, 294 from our CARIFORUM region, and as of yesterday, 120 participants from extra regional. I think this shows the interest in this initiative on the road, and I believe that this is really indeed a timely initiative, as we are more than 10 years into this trade agreement, recalling that the EPA came into being in 2008. As you may be aware, Caribbean Export is a regional agency with the mandate to promote and increase exports and to facilitate and steer investments into the CARIFORUM Caribbean. We represent 15 member states, and we are fortunate to have been implementing the Regional Private Sector Development Program under the 11th European Development Fund, or the 11th EDF. And we value this continued strong and enduring partnership with the European Union. A large focus under the 11th EDF is EPA awareness and support to assist CARICOM producers and service providers to take advantage of the opportunities that exist under this agreement. Thus, today's webinar is the latest tool enabling us to ask critical questions about the challenges that the private sector faces while underscoring the potential benefits that are available under the EPA. And when we speak about benefits and we engage with members of the business community and we engage with members of the regional community, we are talking about granular issues that are more relevant now than ever, because taking advantage of the EPA not only earns us foreign exchange, but in a time of unprecedented crisis that we are facing, it also, by growing your market, growing your business, you create precious jobs for the CARIFORUM Caribbean. The opportunities available under the EPA informs Caribbean Export's continued attention on building private sector capacity through the increased use of green energy alternatives, ICT to foster productivity, and increasing access to sustainable financing mechanisms. We believe that the private sector in the region needs to heavily focus in these new and innovative areas in order to continue growth and expansion of trade under the EPA. In fact, the data emerging from the ex-post evaluation of the CARIFORUM EU EPA has shown us that opportunities exist for trade and ICT-related services, such as business process outsourcing. In addition, leveraging e-commerce to facilitate trade is an opportunity that should not be missed, especially for sectors such as cultural and creative industries, which have significant importance in economic development in the CARIFORUM region. We at the Caribbean Export Development Agency believe that non-tourism services represent the next frontier for exports, the earning of foreign exchange, and the creation of precious jobs across the CARIFORUM Caribbean, tapping into the creativity and talent of CARIFORUM Caribbean people. Additionally, we need to think about niche products in niche markets. And a good example is the market for sustainability products and services such as sustainable tourism, as well as opportunities for investment and cooperation on green energy technologies. They present burgeoning opportunities for the expansion of trade under the agreement. However, in order to make use of these opportunities, sustained effort to build firm level capacity, attract investment, and foster strategic alliances, they are all absolutely essential. And your Caribbean Export Development Agency, we work hand in glove with business, because we recognize the importance of working and having a direct relationship with business, because at the end of the day, it's about creating jobs, earning foreign exchange, and advancing inclusive growth to build a true transformational agenda for the CARIFORUM Caribbean. But recognizing the need to be innovative and go into new areas, and recognizing as well the imperative of lifting our game in the Caribbean. Just 2 weeks ago, Caribbean Export, together with the International Trade Center, we launched a Caribbean Trade for Sustainable Development Hub. Together with the International Trade Center, your Caribbean Export Development Agency will serve as the Caribbean hub and will roll out a number of training and capacity building programs to strengthen the competitiveness of MSMEs by supporting them or supporting you to get certified with sustainability standards and access green finance and access in new value chains. And here again, the emphasis is on new products for new markets for premium prices. And I think the opportunities afforded by the EPA present a wonderful entry for Caribbean business in this area. I mean, we would encourage participants to go to our website at carib-export.com to learn and get additional information on this and other initiatives. Caribbean Export is also striving to be a leader in developing the knowledge economy in the region. We currently provide support to strengthen trade and business intelligence and research capacity within the private sector and regional BSOs, increasing understanding and utilization of the EPA and other market opening agreements. We also have an ambition to be the knowledge hub for trade and business in the CARIFORUM Caribbean. So Caribbean Export will act as a one-stop, non-stop knowledge hub for information on all matters, including the opportunities offered by the EPA. I firmly believe that attracting foreign direct investment is a key pillar to facilitate and fast-track resilience and to build the private sector in the Caribbean. The region needs to attract investment, but it's a very competitive world out there, and therefore we need to focus on innovative sectors which can lead to transformational growth and exponential creation of employment in the region. Therefore, our partnership with the Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies is an important one as we seek to steer foreign direct investment our way. Your Caribbean Export Development Agency pledges to continue our work to promote trade under the EPA, and a recent example of our commitment to expanding CARIFORUM EU trade is a collaboration with the EU and GIZ to host the 4th EU-CARIFORUM Business Forum, as well as our 2020 inaugural virtual trade show. The Business Forum was a three-day conference held in 2019 in Frankfurt, Germany, which brought together over 60 CARIFORUM firms, some represented by the National Business Support Organization, and 40+ European buyers across the goods and services sector. I think one issue is to have a trade show, but the other is, and the more important, is how do you translate this into business and concrete opportunities? And therefore, we are particularly proud of the outcomes from the Business Forum, with 94% of CARIFORUM firms who participated confirming that the forum offered them new market access opportunities, and 69% of CARIFORUM firms reporting that they acquired serious business leads with buyers and distributors. In addition, 79% of firms confirmed that their knowledge of key areas regarding the EU market entry was significantly increased. And crucially, a third of participants reported that they expected to see increased profits. Because we at Caribbean Export, when we support you and business people across the Caribbean, we understand the importance of the bottom line, and we understand the bottom line and its direct relationship with creating jobs. In November of 2020, Caribbean Export, owing to the prevailing situation at the time in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, hosted its inaugural virtual trade show as a follow-up to the Frankfurt event and recorded the participation of 50 CARIFORUM SMEs across the region in alcoholic beverages, natural products, and sauces and condiment sectors. Caribbean Export was encouraged by the level of participation in the virtual event, hosting 70 qualified European buyers, which translated to over 200 business-to-business meetings. These activities, as I noted earlier, mean little if they do not translate to real economic impact for our people in the form of job creation and transforming our economies. I think that with the EPA, we recognize that we have some more work to do to provide greater information, to do additional sensitization. But I think we should also pause and recognize that we have reasons to celebrate as well. Over the period 2016 to 2019, CARIFORUM's export of goods to the EU has seen a phenomenal growth, Ambassador, moving from 2.5 billion United States dollars in 2016 to 5 billion United States dollars in 2019. Among these exports are rum and other spirits distilled from sugarcane, which increased in value from 104 million in 2016 United States dollars to 130 million in 2019. I believe in using data, and I think the empiricism is showing the progress made. In the area of services, we are acutely aware as island economies how integral tourism, creative services, and other professional services are to our economies. Going forward, as I noted earlier, services or non-tourism services will represent a new frontier for CARIFORUM economies in terms of growth and job creation. And therefore, we are very happy with the progress made in this area. The objectives of the EU-CARIFORUM EPA are well known, including the gradual integration of CARIFORUM states into the global economy. Caribbean Export recognizes that beyond the duty-free, quota-free market access for CARIFORUM SMEs, there remains more complex issues, such as changing standards and technical regulations, increasing costs around labeling and packaging of products, and the prevalence of private voluntary standards that are becoming more mainstream, and therefore the de facto standards for accessing the market. And that's why, as recent as yesterday, I had discussions with CrossQ, Mr. Derek Omar, to see how we can partner to support our firms across the region in the area of standards. And I think by partnering with CrossQ and working as one, we can build a strong foundation and provide much more support to our firms in the region. I think that, so overall, we intend to ramp up our EPA workshops and sensitization work going forward. And I would also want to emphasize that looking ahead, COVID-19 and beyond, we believe that these pillars in terms of 1, services, 2, export development, and 3, investment will continue to be vital going forward. And an integral part of our work is providing that information, that knowledge, and us in Caribbean Export continuing to serve as a knowledge hub and a one-stop, non-stop shop and the go-to place in the region for all matters related to trade, investment, and business opportunities. For those of us who don't know us, I would encourage you to go to our website, carib-export.com. Ambassador, Mr. Marie, ASJ, Oliveira, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, participants from the region and from other countries, and members of the private sector. Thank you so very much. It really has been a pleasure having the chance to engage with you this morning. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Deodat Maharaj. As he was just mentioning, for those of you that do not know or may not have heard of Caribbean Export before, please do visit our website, carib-export.com. As he would have mentioned, we are currently implementing the 11th EDF Regional Private Sector Development Programme, and there's a wealth of information as it relates to this programme and all of the work that we have been doing. And in addition, as it relates to the EPA, we do have a number of videos and resources to assist anybody that is looking for more information on the CARIFORUM EU-EPA agreement. And you can find those on our YouTube channel, Caribbean Export on YouTube, and obviously also on our website on the video page. So I would like to invite our next speaker, Head of Delegation of the European Union to Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean States, the OACPS and CARIFORUM, Her Excellency Ambassador Małgorzata Wesołowska.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I think I should relieve everybody from the responsibility of having to pronounce my complicated Polish name, so please feel free to skip that. Mr. Deodat Maharaj, Executive Director, Caribbean Export Development Agency, Mr. Percival Marie, Director General, CARIFORUM Directorate, distinguished panelists, other invited guests, representatives of the private sector, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning for us, maybe good afternoon for some of you, or even good evening. I am very happy to be here today to give these brief opening remarks on the occasion of this webinar. A lot of effort has gone into making this event a reality today, and I think the number of participants speak best for the success of this work. I would therefore like to thank the Caribbean Export Development Agency and the CARIFORUM Directorate for excellent collaboration to make it a success. The significance of this occasion is that it gives you, the private sector, a forum to have a discussion about the EU-CARIFORUM Economic Partnership Agreement. Today's conversation will be fueled by the presentation of the findings of an independent study on the EPA, which was commissioned by the EU, something we have done for all the free trade agreements that we have signed. This is extremely important because it provides an opportunity not only for you to indicate whether you agree or disagree with the findings, but on a deeper level to share your experiences with using the agreement and what you see as the priorities for the next steps. The Caribbean EPA remains one of the flagship free trade agreements for the EU. This is so because even though there have been more modern and higher profile free trade agreements signed since the signature of this one in 2008, there remains something very significant and unique about this EPA. It is still one of the few truly comprehensive trade and development agreements. The EPA was negotiated to ensure that Caribbean countries, along with their ACP counterparts, did not lose their market share and preferential access to the EU. With changing global rules, the old arrangement could not be maintained as it was no longer legal. The EPA has lived up to its purpose and has ensured that the region has retained the access to the EU that it previously had. In addition to the continued market access, the EU continues to work assiduously with CARIFORUM through agencies such as Caribbean Export, our host today, and member states such as Germany through the GIZ to secure more market presence across all sectors. Has it been easy? Definitely not. It has been widely posited that business and investment opportunities available under the EPA have not been fully taken advantage of, and EPA awareness amongst the economic operators from the European Union, as well as from CARIFORUM member states, it is still lacking. Even so, one has to look at it in context. Since the EPA entered into force, it has had to contend with a global recession, several natural disaster events, and presently an unprecedented global pandemic. All of these have had not only a debilitating effect on the economies of the signatories of the EPA on both sides, but it has also delayed the progress of implementation that we would all like to see. We are presently in the process of conducting a second 5-year review of the EPA as mandated in the agreement. Although it is not by any means finalized, I will share with you what we already know. Even with its untapped potential and handicaps caused by external factors over the last 12 years, the EU-CARIFORUM EPA continues to thrive. It is not a perfect agreement, but the positives far outweigh the disenchantments. We therefore look forward with great anticipation to what it will accomplish within the next 12 years, given the right environment. Let me just add a few words. I would like to stress that we are operating now in a very unique environment, not only because of the pandemic. We have very sadly lost one member state, and the post-Brexit era creates a completely new environment for how the private sector has to operate. And because it's not a secret that UK was traditionally a door to the European Union, and that has to be reviewed and changed and re-examined. It's a challenge for both sides. I'm sure everybody will agree. But we also have new legal basis for cooperation with the region, which brings new realities. And then we have the massive negative impact on economies on both sides as a result of the pandemic. All of that creates a new dynamic, a new imperative, and I think obligation on all of us to work hard on how to enhance private sector to private sector relationships between the sides. I still cannot believe how few Caribbean products I see when I go back to Europe, even though the exports have grown. A lot of the, just take it, spices from the region are not easily found in the supermarkets, unlike the Asian spices, for example, that you can find in every corner shop these days. So there plenty has to be done. The same with European products coming here. Traditionally, we often heard the markets are too small here. The pandemic creates new dynamic because everybody will be seeking for new opportunities, new investments, and we really need to make EPA work and not just be a good document on paper. And this is where you, our estimated private sector representatives present here today, come in. Even as we put the necessary infrastructure in place and ensure that the legal and administrative framework is secured, the continued success of the EPA and how it benefits the people in this region rests squarely on your shoulders. It is your EPA, own it, make use of it, and benefit from it. I wish you all a very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think we'll move straight into our next speaker, and I'd like to invite Mr. Percival Marie, Director General, CARIFORUM Directorate, to give his remarks.
Thank you, Madam Coordinator. Ambassador of the European Union to Barbados, OECS, CARICOM, and CARIFORUM, Assistant Secretary General of the OACPS, Executive Director, Caribbean Export, members of the private sector and the business community, invited guest participants. I appreciate the opportunity to deliver a few welcoming remarks on behalf of CARIFORUM at what I consider to be an extremely important webinar. As you may be aware, the first evaluation of the EPA and the effectiveness and impact of the EPA was conducted a few years ago. I think that the report was delivered sometime in 2016 or thereabouts. A second 5-year review is actually underway, and that review is the joint responsibility of the European Union and CARIFORUM. A joint task force does exist, which will do the analysis and prepare a report which will go to a Trade and Development Committee and possibly by the end of the year to a joint council of ministers of CARIFORUM and the European Union. A number of inputs will be used in the design of that second 5-year review. You heard reference to one of them, which was a study commissioned by the European Commission, an evaluation study. That is one of the numerous inputs. On our part, we have conducted exercises on the revenue implications of the EPA. We've been looking at things like the built-in agenda. We're looking at things like how the most favored nation clauses have been used, things of that nature. We have agreed with the Commission on literally an annotated table of contents for that agreement. And as I indicated to you, the evaluation study earlier references one of the numerous inputs that will be used in the design of the 5-year evaluation of the operations of the EPA. I say that so that whenever reference is made to that evaluation study, you understand that it is not the evaluation exercise and that it is one of the numerous inputs that will go into the study, into the 5-year review. Having said that, I want to give an indication that the available information, including the first 5-year review and the official trade statistics, bear testimony to the fact that CARIFORUM states are not yet feeling the anticipated impact and enjoying the potential benefits of the CARIFORUM EU EPA. Anecdotal information, however, exists which suggests that one or two individual enterprises can recount and tell success stories in the market of the European Union for goods and services and in attracting European investments. That situation clearly indicates that the opportunities are there, but that CARIFORUM states have not yet been able to convert negotiated market access into beneficial market presence. That situation demands close scrutiny, and we must address the challenges which inhibit the region's capacity to convert market access for goods and services into the European market, into market presence. The least that we can do as a region is to address those challenges over which we have some form of direct control, while we continue to negotiate and dialogue with our European Union partners on those areas and issues which are within their own control. As a region, we have begun to take some small but steady steps in capacity building, most of which are supported by financial or technical assistance from the European Union. I want to take some time to cite some examples. The first one I give is Caribbean Export, for example. It operates a €27 million program for trade and private sector development. It provides direct assistance to the private sector and to individual enterprises in a large number of areas. The second that I want to mention is the Caribbean Development Bank, which operates on behalf of CARIFORUM, an EPA and CSME standby facility, which states can access at a national level to build private sector capacity. For example, a project has just been approved for a cluster approach to development and marketing for small and micro agro-processors in Jamaica. That gives you the kind of project, an indication of the kind of project that is being financed out of that standby facility. Assistance is provided through COSU to deal with improved capacity in the areas of standards, conformity assessment, and certification, including a number of other areas. I give these few examples not to indicate that enough is being done to provide the range, type, and value of assistance which the private sector and the individual enterprises require to take advantage of the EPA, but to give an indication of the commitment which exists at CARIFORUM to provide the required support to the private sector. Webinars such as the one organized today will help to expose the private sector to opportunities which may be available and may assist in identifying the kind of future support which CARIFORUM may need to address as it seeks to facilitate the private sector. Our region's development will be positively impacted if we can take increased advantage of the opportunities of the EPA. I wish to express CARIFORUM's appreciation to the EU delegation in Barbados and to Caribbean Export for taking the lead in organizing this webinar. I wish also to express CARIFORUM's appreciation for the continued support of the European Union. I sincerely wish that this webinar will be successful and that participants will derive benefits from participation. Thank you, Madam Coordinator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marie, for your comments there. I think now that we have our opening session finished, I believe we're a few minutes behind the schedule, but I would like us to move swiftly on to the next session. So I would like to firstly thank our invited speakers, Ambassador Mr. Marie and also Mr. Maharaj. And obviously, if you do need to leave now, then please do so. But I would like to invite our first set of speakers for our very first session, looking at the case study and the findings for EU-CARIFORUM trade. So this session will be moderated by Mr. Adam Wisniewski, First Secretary, Trade Affairs Manager, European Union Delegation to Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean States, OECS and CARIFORUM. And we have our presenters, Nora Placia, Project Manager for ECOWAS, and co-presenter Michael Frunzig, Head of Economic Team at ECOWAS as well. So let me hand over the control of the presentation to Nora. Bear me a second. Or you should, do you have it, Nora, already? So you can share your presentation whenever you're ready.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joellen, and would like to also thank to Mr. Dodat Maharaj, Executive Director of the Caribbean Export, our Ambassador Gosia Wasilewska, and the CARIFORUM Director General Mr. Percival Murray for delivering so pertinent and relatable opening remarks. So before we move to the presentations, I just wanted to mention and underline that the reasons we are here is to make sure that the EPA is delivering to its potential and that it's reaching its ultimate beneficiaries, the private sector. For that, we just used the opportunity of recently concluded ex-post valuation study that, as was mentioned, was commissioned by the EU and conducted by independent experts from a very reputable consultancy, ECROIS. Assessing and evaluating complex and comprehensive trade agreement is not an easy task. Assessing and evaluating agreements with prevailing development aspects and which are joining regions with over 40 countries is even more difficult. And for sure, such studies will not turn all the stones or provide all the questions they would like to have answers to the questions, but for sure they will be able to give us very good sensations of where we are, and most importantly point to the directions we shall move for better, more inclusive and beneficial utilization of the agreement. So we'll start this panel with the presentation of the evaluation study findings and recommendations for exporters, producers and service providers, and we will follow it up with reflections and highlights based on their very own experience and expertise from representatives of the European Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Trinidad and Tobago and the Department of Structural Economic Transformation and Trade of Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States. So I would like to now invite Michael Frunzig and Nora Placia to make the presentation. Michael is a senior consultant in ECROIS with more than 12 years of experience. He has extensively worked on trade and competitiveness for organizations such as the Asian Development Bank, the United Nations, or USAID. Nora Placia is experienced trade evaluator with more than 20 years of experience as team leader and experts in projects for European Commission and for Dutch government. So without further ado, Michael and Nora, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you very much, Adam, and also thank you for the organizers for having us here. It's an honor to present our presentation, and we are also very glad to see so many participants. I will now share my screen. Can you all see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Let me start the presentation. Yes, so indeed we have carried out an evaluation study on the EPA, and today we are focusing on the lessons that we can learn from that. So it's the ex post evaluation of the CARIFORUM EU the Economic Partnership Agreement, and as said already in the introduction, it's a special agreement. It's in the sense it's very comprehensive and also development oriented. And the purpose of our study was to determine the extent to which the EPA has been implemented, where there were bottlenecks, and to which extent the EPA contributed efficiently and effectively to reaching the objectives set out in the EPA. So today we will not present the results of the entire study, but we will focus on the impacts, on the economic impacts, and specifically on 4 case studies that we conducted to really understand better what are the issues in trade and investment between the EU and the CARIFORUM region. We used a range of methods for this evaluation, so data analysis, economic modeling, literature review, and extensive stakeholder consultations, as well as the case studies. So we've spoken to more than 200 people for this study, which has been extremely helpful. Some of you may have seen me or my colleagues before, but we have been with a large group of people, and we would also like to thank everybody who contributed and provided inputs. So if we first look at what happens to the CARIFORUM goods exports to the EU, and of course this equals the EU imports from the CARIFORUM region. So what this graph shows is the period of 2005, so 3 years before the agreement entered into force, until 2018. And what we actually see is that so the green bars are the CARIFORUM exports to the EU. And what we see is actually that the level of goods exports to the EU is today, or in 2018, lower than in 2008. If we compare it to the overall exports of the CARIFORUM region, which are the black bars, you see more of an increase there, and the red line shows the share of the EU in the importance of exports of CARIFORUM. So the EU has actually become less important for CARIFORUM exports over the periods. That being said, we also see positive signs. For example, there has been a diversification of imports. There has been less focus on mineral fuels, and we see more exports of food and manufactured items. For example, chemicals and related products, or food and live animals. And there are various sectors which show export potential. So these are the traditional products like sugar and bananas, but there are also other products that are coming up, such as juices. We've seen that in Jamaica. Dominican Republic has been a big exporter of organic produce. And we've also seen examples of niche high value added manufacturing products, for example, medical devices and electronics. If we look at the other way around, this shows the CARIFORUM goods imports from the EU. So that's the same as the EU exports. These are the blue bars, and there we see an increase of imports in the past 10 years. Also here we see the red line that the importance of the EU has declined, although in recent years it's also been a bit higher after the crisis. Main products have traditionally been machinery and transport equipment, but we also see diversification here. So this category of machine and transport equipment has gradually become smaller, while most other product categories have become more important, especially the mineral fuels and lubricants and manufactured goods and articles. So it's of course also important to realize what would happen in the absence of an agreement. So while on the CARIFORUM side, the CARIFORUM region already had good access to the EU market. And of course the EPA was installed to make sure that this market access would not be lost when the preferences would be taken away. Well, for the EU, the agreement was really about opening up the CARIFORUM markets for trade. But as we can see, the changes in trade have not been very significant. Of course, so far we have looked at the changes in trades overall for the region, but it's also important to point out that there are important country differences. So these graphs actually show the exports of different CARIFORUM countries and the imports from the EU from different CARIFORUM countries. And you see that one of the reasons for the decline in the total level of exports is the exports of Trinidad and Tobago, which have mainly declined as a result of a decrease in oil prices. Well, you see there have also been countries that have been able to pick up on their exports to the EU, for example, the Dominican Republic, but to a lesser extent also Belize and Antigua and Barbuda. Also, on the import side, there are differences where the Dominican Republic again shows most significant import growth. That's the yellow line here. I can understand that you cannot see all the countries in detail, but our report is of course publicly available and online. So please have a look if you want to see all details. Then for services and investment. Services are really important for the region, and they make up the majority of CARIFORUM exports. Unfortunately, data issues do not allow for a very detailed assessment of what happened to the bilateral trade between the countries. So exports seem to have increased a lot of CARIFORUM, but it's mainly stemming from two countries, and it was very difficult to see what was really behind it. So we don't have conclusive outcomes for that. The services imports from the EU nearly doubled between 2010 and 2018. Of course, travel services, so tourism accounts for the majority of CARIFORUM services exports, over 80%. But as was also mentioned in the opening speech, that there are also some sectors that really show some potential here. For example, the business processing outsourcing and cultural services, they are at this moment still very small, but we've seen growth in these sectors. Also, with respect to investment, data are not very detailed. So again, we cannot have a very detailed assessment of what happened. We see that while total inward investment FDI decreased over the evaluation periods, we see that the EU direct investment abroad in CARIFORUM has increased over the past 5 years. But it was very difficult, so we are aware of the data limitations, but also in the consultations we didn't find any specific cases or clear champions of investments that have increased. The main sectors for investment are real estate and hotel construction, so that shows again the importance of the tourism sector, partly, as well as telecommunication services. And again, there are country and sectoral differences. For example, some of the CARIFORUM countries are very rich in terms of resources. So there are resource-related investment in some countries, for example, in the gold sector in Suriname. While business services, for example, Jamaica is a very strong player in that market. If we look at the countries, the Dominican Republic is by far the largest recipient of foreign direct investment. So the question then is, of course, what factors have affected the trade performance? Well, what our consultations revealed is that stakeholders there's a very limited awareness of the agreement. This is not only the case with business associations or individual companies, but even with companies that are actually successfully operating in the EU market. Not all of them are actually aware of the agreement. This is also something that we saw in the EU, actually, that also on the EU side, companies are not aware of the EPA and the advantages that it could bring. So that's a very important first factor. That being said, we also see that the number of companies that consider the EU as a priority market is limited. Of course, it's always only a limited share of companies that export, and the ones that do export often export to nearby markets. And of course, that can be in the region, but also, for example, the US is of course a very large nearby market. So there's only interest from a limited set of companies. We also found that there are barriers in the home country. So this is both at the company level. So does the company really have the capacity and the skills to enter into the exports and on the EU specifically? And also issues in the business environment, for example, the availability of finance, which affects exports. Also, there are some EU policies and regulations at the EU level or at national level that pose challenges to take advantage of the trade opportunities. For example, countries still have visa requirements, which makes it sometimes difficult for individuals, business persons to go abroad. And while officially it's not part of the agreement, but still it makes it difficult to take advantage of the agreement. Also, the relatively high standards and the changes in standards that are taking place on the EU markets is also posing challenges to CARIFORUM business. Yes, we've also looked at the impact of development cooperation. So there has been development cooperation provided by the EU on various different fields, also to the implementation of the agreement or related to, for example, laboratories. But here we focus on the ones that's on private sector development. So there has been a big regional private sector development program under the 10th EDF and sector-specific programs such as the coconut industry development program. We've looked a bit closer at the 10th EDF regional private sector development program. What we saw there is that the expected result of the activities such as trade missions, study tours, business roundtables and market intelligence systems were achieved. And often there was also very appreciation of all these activities by business. They were valued quite positively. We also saw that the program played a role in consolidating the efforts to strengthen CEDA, as we can all see today also where they are. But there are also still issues with respect to sustainability, financial sustainability of the organization. Would it be able to survive without donor support? And it should also be mentioned that it was difficult to assess the overall impact on trade and investment. What we saw is that activities have been dispersed, and that for some companies it has also been one-off activities. So they once joined a study tour or a trade mission, but there was no consistent follow-up or technical assistance combined with that, which makes it challenging to achieve also the consolidated impact. So these have been challenges that we've identified in the development cooperation on private sector development. As said, this presentation focuses on 4 specific case studies, for which I will now give the floor to my colleague, Michael Vincey.
Yes, hello. So I will focus on 4 specific industries. So the thing is, we know, of course, about commodities, such as bananas and other goods that are, well, very strongly represented in the export basket of CARIFORUM countries. But we also wanted to explore what are the opportunities, what are the emerging sectors, where is potential to actually use the EPA and to promote exports to the EU and more generally trade and investment between the EU and CARIFORUM. The issue, of course, is that most opportunities will be like in niche sectors. They will be focused on like high quality, high value exports and investments. We would not expect that CARIFORUM will suddenly enter the automotive industry. We would expect that, yeah, the opportunities are really in these niche areas. The issue, of course, is, well, once we look at niche sectors, most of the issues that are faced by these sectors are rather idiosyncratic. They're very sector specific. And the question then, of course, is, well, how can a trade agreement actually address these very sector specific issues? And in that respect, the EPA has actually been groundbreaking because it explicitly took into account many of all these highly sector-specific, of these highly idiosyncratic issues. So we're all aware of the cultural protocol, which of course is very important for cultural and creative industries. There's also an investment chapter that tries to address investment issues. And of course, and probably most importantly, well, the EPA also includes provisions for capacity building and technical assistance. So essentially an area where, well, the EPA indirectly could try to address broader challenges faced by companies in the Caribbean. So like challenges related to logistics, challenges related to, just building the business sophistication that is necessary to actually be successful in, well, the EU market. So the EPA, in many respects, is doing quite a few things to address all these sector-specific, these idiosyncratic issues. But of course, well, by itself, the EPA can only go that far. We cannot really hope that it can address all of these issues, and we'll see some of these highlighted, well, in our sector case studies. So we specifically looked at 4 different sectors. Well, the first sector are the creative industries. The second one is the beverage industry, and in particular the rum industry. We also looked at foreign direct investment in the tourism sector. And lastly, we also looked at the other direction of trade. We looked at exports of dairy products from the EU to CARIFORUM countries. Nora, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So creative industries is very interesting because it's a very dynamic industry and CARIFORUM countries in the Caribbean more generally. It's an industry that draws on the creativity of people, that draws on the very rich cultural heritage, that in many respects can also draw on, well, the cultural connections between the Caribbean and other countries. Of course, both Europe, but well, also the US and Canada and well, other countries in the region. As such, the creative industry is, well, very diverse. There are, of course, sub-industries like the music industry, well, of course, the well-known Jamaican music industry. There are more emerging sectors like film and television, so that could include on-location shots by international film productions, but also an emerging animation industry. We can also think about publishing, performing arts, visual arts, festivals, tourism, cultural tourism, or the fashion industry. So it's really a very diverse industry, and all these subsectors in creative industries, of course, face their own challenges and issues. So we specifically, in our study, in our ex-post evaluation, looked at the music industry and the film and television industry. We did so through desk research and extensive interviews with stakeholders. So we interviewed stakeholders at the Business Forum in Frankfurt, and we interviewed stakeholders in the Caribbean through face-to-face consultations. Maybe, well, one similarity, I mean, of course, the industry is very diverse, but one similarity, of course, is that creative industries really thrive through people-to-people contacts. So that's very important for this industry. I mean, exports itself are fairly simple. I mean, you can do it digitally these days. You don't ship it like goods in a container. So transport itself is not the issue, but the delivery is an issue. I mean, you can trade some goods like music digitally, but you still need these people-to-people contact. You need artists going to Europe to perform at festivals. You need artists going to Europe to meet people in the industry and to create networks. So that is very important, and that's a challenge that probably cuts across all these subsectors of creative industries. Of course, that's a challenge for like a traditional trade agreement. So traditionally, a trade agreement would just be focused on tariffs and rules of origin and these kinds of things. So traditionally, a trade agreement could not do much for creative industries. And in that respect, the EPA is different because it explicitly tried to facilitate trade in creative services and in creative products. So if we look at the industry, there are, of course, challenges that are of a more general nature. So if we look at the fundamentals, in some respect, the industry can benefit from cultural ties between Europe and the Caribbean, but then at the same time, these cultural ties are probably stronger between the US and the Caribbean. There's of course also a shorter physical distance. It's also in the same time zone, so all that favors for the US and Canada as a market compared to Europe. Then I mentioned, well, that people-to-people contact are basically critical or essential for this industry. So the visa regime and travel freedom is an important issue. Can an artist easily travel to Europe to perform at festivals? Can an artist easily travel to Europe to create networks, to form networks? That's often a challenge. Of course, the EPA tries to facilitate it through, well, the cultural protocol, but in practice, challenges remain also because at the end of the day, well, the visa regime is also a matter of all individual EU member states. There are also issues related to finance, to taxation, to double taxation agreements. Of course, if an artist goes to Europe, performs at festivals, it can be quite complicated with regards to how, well, the revenues and how the revenues are taxed. And then, of course, well, there's the broader issue of, well, the business environment in the Caribbean. That's a bit unrelated to the EPA itself, but it's still very important. There is, of course, fragmentation. Individual markets in Caribbean countries are typically very small. Their access to finance issues. Policy frameworks are in place in some countries, but not in others. And to some extent, we also see this fragmentation and these strong differences between countries and how strong industries are in some countries and how weak they are in others. So, for example, the music industry, of course, is very strong in Jamaica. The animation industry is strongly emerging in Trinidad and Tobago, but it's, of course, weaker in, well, smaller countries where producers don't really have, well, the necessary scale of the market to support themselves. So these are all challenges that more creative industries face, and some challenges can be addressed by the EPA, some challenges are addressed by the EPA, and some are more general in nature. So what can we do looking forward to address some of these challenges? And well, I think the first and foremost, it's really technical assistance and awareness raising. So providing creative industries, well, with the skills and the know-how and the networks that they need to thrive and to exploit all the opportunities of the EPA. So in that respect, the Business Forum in Frankfurt was probably very important, as it allowed some creative producers, to form these networks in the EU, to meet people in the EU and to connect with them. What could also be very beneficial is, sort of like a matchmaking or twinning between public authorities in CARIFORUM countries and EU countries. So some EU countries strongly support the creative industries. There are often national or regional agencies that try to provide support. And some twinning with corresponding agencies in CARIFORUM countries could be mutually beneficial. Again, it comes from, well, a point of view from, well, the simple fact that creative industries are driven by people and people-to-people contact. So in that sense, well, this matchmaking could be beneficial. It's just important, as with technical assistance, to also target it, to be like fully aware of which countries actually have the potential and which ones have not. So we know, for example, that Trinidad is strongly emerging as a producer for animation. So Trinidad and Tobago probably should be a target, should be a priority to support this strongly emerging industries. And lastly, and this is not really in the study because it's really a new issue, but of course a very important issue, there needs to be a dialogue related to COVID-19 travel restrictions. This is something that strongly affects creative industries, and it's important to discuss it and to see what all pragmatic solutions can be reached to facilitate travel of creative professionals between Europe and CARIFORUM in the face of all these restrictions. Thank you. The next industry we were looking at was, well, the beverage industry. And this, of course, is, well, a traditionally strong industry. If we look at rum as, well, really a very important export, as a very important industry in many Caribbean countries. But the beverage industry also goes beyond rum. So there are also fruit juices and mineral waters with some exports to the EU. There's beer. And as we also saw, there are also some emerging niche products that are really niche, very small, probably sales of only a few 10,000 euros per year. like CMOS drinks. That's one example of a product that we saw at the Frankfurt Business Forum that has, some very limited, but still has at least some potential in EU markets. Nonetheless, we mostly focus on the rum industry, as this is really the big player, and we see that there is strong potential, that there are many producers that are quite competitive, that can succeed, and in many cases already succeed in the EU market. Nonetheless, it's also an industry that faces challenges. And first and foremost, there's strong competition. There's competition from EU overseas regions. There's competition from Cuba and the US. But at the same time, there are also some local strengths. There's, of course, the reputation of Caribbean rum, which is very important. And there also, there's the availability of local supplies of raw materials such as sugar and molasses. The next slide, please. So if we look at the challenges, and mostly the challenges of the rum industry, and to some extent they also apply to like other beverage products. So as I mentioned, first of all, it's the stiff competition from other producing countries. With regards to supplies, on one side, we have local supplies of raw materials like sugar and molasses. But on the other side, there are challenges related to supplies such as bottles and other inputs that need to be imported typically. There are some market access challenges. So these don't relate to tariffs. With tariffs, the market access is basically the best it can be. But there are challenges related to actually entering the EU market, to actually finding distributors, to solving the logistics problems. So this is a major issue for most rum producers. Another challenge is related to, essentially requirements that the EU imposes on all producers, whether these are domestic producers in the EU or third country producers, things such as labeling requirements, which can be quite challenging given, that one would have to provide labels in different EU languages depending on, which EU market one is interested in. And lastly, there's the issue of business sophistication, and there's basically a huge variety. So there are rum producers who are extremely sophisticated, who fully understand the EU market and the requirements, and are extremely successful in this market. But especially smaller producers often struggle to solve these very practical issues, to understand the EU market, to understand how one can distribute rum or other beverages in the market, and so on. So as far as the EPA is concerned, there is, of course, the famous rum program, which was what has been widely reported, a very successful one, very successful in sort of like upscaling rum production in the Caribbean and moving it to the next level, away from bulk production towards high quality rums. And this, of course, is something that one can build on, that something that could be continued, where one would provide technical assistance to producers so that they can address some of these challenges related to labeling requirements, related to logistics and distribution, essentially building the sophistication of businesses. The next slide, please. Now moving to a very different industry, it's the tourism industry. And of course, this is a very important industry in most CARIFORUM countries, most but not all. And again, here, the EU is quite important, not as important as the US, maybe also not as important as Canada, but nonetheless, it's an important source of visitors, and the EU is also an important source of investors. The tourism industry is quite strong. It's also strongly linked to other sectors that provide inputs to the industry. It's an important employer. There's also a strong potential of the tourism industry. There are some countries that currently are not as strong, for example, Guyana, but that at least have the potential, that have also the natural resources and the attractiveness that could turn tourism into, a major industry. And at the same time, of course, the tourism industry has been devastated literally by COVID-19 this year, something that the evaluation itself does not cover, but that, of course, is very important looking ahead at the years to come. The next slide, please. So what we did for the tourism industry, we didn't study the tourism industry per se, so we specifically focused on the issue of FDI, of EU investments coming into CARIFORUM tourism sectors. So investments into hotels, but also restaurants and other tourism services. The issue there was that there is just not a lot of data available on FDI, so it was very hard to really get a grasp of the magnitude of investments. So there is a lot of anecdotal evidence, of course, that there is significant investment, but it was very hard to really quantify it. It was also interesting to see what the EPA actually did for tourism FDI, and at the end of the day, probably very little, because ultimately, tourism FDI is driven by, well, much bigger factors like the attractiveness of a country or of a location for tourism. And well, once an investor sees that the country is attractive, then all the challenges that might exist, the investor is typically willing and able to navigate and to solve themselves. I mean, of course, it would be nice if there are no challenges, but ultimately it's really the attractiveness of a country or of a region or of a place that drives, well, the investment. Nonetheless, there are a few challenges, and interestingly, most of these challenges are very idiosyncratic. They're typically very specific to the country, often even specific to the investor and the investor's specific situation. And that means, of course, that the trade agreement by itself cannot really do much to really address it. So what are these issues? So there are sometimes issues to land registration, issues related to crime levels, security, safety, issues related to, well, the broader investment climate, issues related to taxation. These are very idiosyncratic issues. They can typically be solved by, well, those investors who are willing and determined, and the EPA itself would probably have a very hard time really addressing it, given, well, that the investment chapter is still relatively broad and speaks in very general terms. Nonetheless, where, well, the EPA could do something is in strengthening the dialogue on these issues, basically providing a venue for investors to raise concerns, to raise these issues, for these issues to be addressed when possible, and, well, to be at least noted when it's not really possible to address them. There are a few other recommendations. I mean, of course, as we mentioned, a dialogue is very important, especially now on COVID-19 travel restrictions, as related to, well, creative industries, but of course, extremely important for the tourism industry too. The next slide, please. The last case study we looked at were dairy imports. So now we're looking at the other direction, exports from the EU to CARIFORUM countries, to also get a grasp to what extent the EPA has facilitated trade in this direction. We looked at dairy imports because this is an important sector. It's also an area, a sector where the EU is traditionally strong. Well, the first observation, of course, is that most exports go to the large CARIFORUM countries, namely the Dominican Republic, Trinidad and Tobago, and all the other countries, exports are rather limited to. The next slide, please. So looking at these two largest markets, the Dominican Republic on the left-hand side and Trinidad and Tobago on the right-hand side, well, we see that the EU has a very strong market position. And at least for the Dominican Republic, we also see a very strong increase, probably also due to the EPA. At the same time, we also see that the US gained a lot in recent years, probably related to the free trade agreement between the US and the Dominican Republic. And we see that, yeah, New Zealand more or less stayed flat. So we see like increasing demand, and this demand was mostly served by, well, the EU and the US. That the US is so strong, this is also not a surprise, because if we look at the tariff rate quotas, then they were far more quickly liberalized for, well, in the US Dominican Republic free trade agreement compared to the EPA. If we look at Trinidad and Tobago, that's a bit different because there's no free trade agreement with the US. So there we see that New Zealand is actually very strong as an exporter, of course, based on all New Zealand's natural competitive advantages. Nonetheless, we see that, yeah, both countries and more generally for the Caribbean has strongly developed as a market for EU exporters. The next slide, please. So as I mentioned already, yeah, liberalization was less aggressive under the EPA than under the free trade agreement between the US and the Dominican Republic. What is an issue is between local production and imports. Of course, if EU imports are coming in, it might hurt domestic producers. But at the same time, one also has to note that, yeah, essentially due to climate, dairy products are not like a natural advantage or like a comparative advantage for most Caribbean countries. So at least on paper, it makes sense that Caribbean countries import dairy products. There's also a positive contribution of EU exports to the Caribbean. They resulted in lower prices and greater choice for consumers. As far as recommendations are concerned, well, it's really about technical assistance to the local dairy industry, but it really needs to be carefully targeted to those subsectors where Caribbean countries have a natural competitive advantage, where it actually makes sense to promote dairy production. So in most cases, that would probably mean processing, for example, of milk powder into more refined products. So to summarize, what can we learn from all these four industries? And of course, we also looked in much less detail at a few other industries, like sauces and condiments, for example. The first observation is that the EPA can only do that much. It's a trade agreement. It's a very long trade agreement. It tries to address many sector-specific issues, but at the end of the day, many of the issues faced by specific sectors are quite idiosyncratic, are quite sector-specific. They often relate to the business environment and challenges that are really outside any trade agreement, like logistics and transport or finding a distributor in the EU market. Nonetheless, well, the EPA can provide the framework for addressing these challenges. And what does framework mean? Well, it means, of course, very broad things. It means first and foremost, raising awareness of EPA provisions and any technical assistance and programs and mechanisms that support exporters. Second, the EPA can provide transparency on market access requirements in the EU market. It can provide a forum for a dialogue on challenges and solutions. These challenges and solutions would then be outside the EPA itself, but the dialogue, of course, would be an element of it. And lastly, it's of course for the provision of technical assistance to build the capacity of the private sector to actually use the EPA and to exploit it. These are really very broad recommendations, and I'm sure, well, in the ensuing panel discussions, we'll talk a bit more about some of these sector-specific issues and possible solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora and Michael, for your very informative presentation. I think that particularly the lessons, the conclusions that you presented on your last slide should resonate with us and point to the directions we should go with our efforts to improve the utilization of the EPA. I will now invite representative of Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States, Mr. Espifion Oliveira, to share with us his experiences and views on the EPA. Espifion has assumed the position of Assistant Secretary General of the Department of Structural Economic Transformation and Trade of the OACPS in 2020, before he served as a Deputy Executive Director of the Caribbean Export and Development Agency. Espifion, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear?
Sorry, sorry, Scipion, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let everyone, Demi Sinanan here from Caribbean Export. I just wanted to let all our presenters, all attendees know, if you have any questions, you can submit your questions in the chat panel or also the questions panel, and Adam will field them and put them over to Scipion. So I apologize for the interruption, Scipion. Please continue.
No. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Espifion, yes.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be here today. I really wanted to say my appreciation to the words that were said by Director General Marie, by Ambassador Wasilewska, about the new director of Caribbean Export, Mr. Maharaj. I think that all have expressed the need for cooperation. First, before going into the EPA itself, I just wanted to present who we are. I work for the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. We regroup 79 countries from Africa, Caribbean, and the Pacific. and we became an international organization last year, and we are derived from the ACP group founded in 1975 via the Georgetown Agreement. What we try to do together is to promote the sustainable development of our states. And we do this through the gradual integration of our countries to the global economy, our objective being to reduce and eventually eradicate poverty. Youth and women are at the center of all our actions. We are led by His Excellency Mr. George Revelo Pinto Chicote, our Secretary General from Angola, who's very committed to promoting the private sector. I feel like an old person. To do this presentation, I took a lot of time and I wonder a lot. I think that the EPA adventure has involved many people. I wanted also to recognize the work of people that, like Mr. Henry Bernal, that are no longer here, and other people that really work into transforming this agreement into an instrument. One of the main challenges that we had at the beginning, I was in the EPA negotiation more from the Brussels side. I was not part of the CRNM, where you have very competent people like Mr. Lodge, Ramis Shaitu, Mr. Bernal, and others, is that the expectations at the beginning were too high. Hindsight, I would say that we gave too much hope about the development impact of EPA. And the truth is what was said today, that EPA was the best we could get in a globalized world, a world that was really going on the WTO rules. So that was the best we could get. But at the beginning, and I that was involved in the negotiations, it was sold as that we will be better off, that our economies will be better off in the future than under the regimes that we had. At that time, some might remember, we did produce bananas in the Caribbean, especially St. Lucia and Dominica, in which I worked with to promote the banana protocol, and we lost that. Also, we negotiated with a Damocles sword. We were all afraid to be under GSP. We thought that if we didn't sign in 2008, all of our exports will stop to the European Union. Nevertheless, we saw that African brothers and sisters were able to delay the signature, and they didn't lose those preferences. Also, we thought that we would, the main cookie in EPA was services. We thought that we would be able really to access freely the European service market, but some way or another, we didn't realize that we couldn't access those markets because the visa issue that was mentioned in the study was a big issue. So the prerogative to obtain market access doesn't rely with the person that signed the agreement with you. It relies with the member states. Also, many of the OECS thought that they would integrate better with the French Caribbean territories, and we didn't openly discuss market access as the octroi de mer, that I also mentioned in the study, and that at the time of negotiation, our countries didn't understand that we will have that barrier in the French territories. You can say, of course, that it is a non-discriminatory for many reasons mentioned in the study, but for some of us working on that, is something that left, I would say, a sour taste. Also, looking back, I don't think that that the region itself was not really to liberalize the regional market. We have seen that in the little implementation of Article 238 of the EPA, which is regional preference, and still the debate concerning the law 173, which is the law in Dominican Republic concerning agents and importers. So we're looking back now, and I think that the story and what was presented today is very interesting because it looks differently, but at that time, these issues represented great debate and great incognita. I would like to go to the successes, and I think there were many successes, a lot through EDF funded initiatives. One that I am very dear of is the Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, CAIPA, in which I worked with the people like Suzette Hudson, and nowadays the president of CAIPA is held by St. Vincent and the Grenadines. CAIPA today unites 23 members. They have been able to produce a regional investment promoter strategy that has been implemented by 23 countries. It overpasses the CARIFORUM and includes really the OCTs, especially led by Curacao, Turks and Caicos, Cayman Islands, Montserrat, and others. And we're really implementing a regional investment promotion strategy towards the benefit of all, really portraying the Caribbean as the premium destination for investment. At the beginning, there was a lot of questions. Could it be done? Could we promote investment as a group? And the answer was not necessarily. but we can enhance that regional investment promotion map through joint collaboration. That also led to a joint investment promotion strategy between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. That for me was a very big success. That I had the pleasure to work in these two programs with Mrs. Hudson and Mrs. Ileana Tejada from Caribbean Expo. Also, and I see that Von Rennick is going to speak later on, RISPA did a wonderful job. They really took the promotion of an essential industry, which is rum, especially essential for me, because I do believe it's a premium product that has to be fully consumed, and it benefit everybody. It showed that we could work together, and nowadays, rum, Caribbean rum is recognized in the world as a very good product. We worked a lot in regional infrastructure with CrossQ and Indocal. There, Mr. Derek Omar from CrossQ helped a lot harmonizing standards and adapting them. This is something in which the report also concentrated. Caribbean Export, my former working place, really did a lot for branding the Caribbean. I think that Pamela Cook Hamilton did a lot of job in that, and the team promoting branding. And I believe that all of this, also the work that we did together with many people like Ambassador Hales, that I hope that he's today, Mr. Ivan Ogando, Junior Lodge, Ambassador Humphrey, Neville December from CARICOM, definitely Mr. LaRocque that was guiding a lot, and also Mr. Marie. It created a regional brotherhood that strengthened the links between all of the countries, especially between my own, the Dominican Republic, and CARICOM, because we fought in the trenches for survival of our industries. Looking forward, I have some comments. I think that SME financing is a big deal. It's something that we have to solve. Our countries do have liquidity. The problem that we have is not that we don't have money in our country. We do have a lot, but it's not getting where it has to go. It's not helping SMEs to be more competitive. We, at the OACPS, to the leadership of His Excellency, Mr. Chicote, we're trying to put financial instruments that are audacious, that favor sustainable development over financial performance, which is not the case up to now, or the ones that are EDF funded, that are development oriented, that are willing to assume a calculated risk to foster sustainable economic development, that are innovative, that really bring something extra to our countries, either interest rate repayment periods, collateral guarantees, especially for the services sector, something that we're working with EURIS now, which is a guarantee scheme, and that are also inclusive. At the OACPS is something that is also led by Ambassador Hales from Guyana. We do not accept that our countries might be included from financial resources that were agreed under the cooperation because of lists that we don't manage. And I'm referring directly to the EU Anti-Money Laundering and Counterterrorism Financing List, AML-CTF, something in which Caribbean Export worked a lot with CARIFORUM in the past. And I hope that we have to continue to have a discussion on that list, on how countries are evaluated. It shouldn't be an unilateral decision that affects trade and investment. Looking forward, I also, the presenters talked a lot, and the report was very well done on value chains. One of the things that we're working at the OACPS level is to allow the accumulation of rules of origin between countries under EPA and anything but arms. In the Caribbean, it only affects Haiti, which is the only country that is really under anything but arms. But that has an impact in Africa, and also had a direct impact in Dominican Republic and Haiti's economic integration, because we had a joint production of textile that was hampered because of the lack of possibility of accumulating between those two regimes. And we think it's important to create a regional value chain that is important. Also, enhanced consular cooperation is really important. It was mentioned by the presenters. I think also we have to have an honest discussion of the sustainability agenda and regulations that the European Union might put in the future. We were surprised in the Dominican Republic, and I was part of that before having this job, that the organic regulation had passed without a serious discussion with suppliers in Dominican Republic. This is why we're trying to work towards the creation of an early warning alert mechanism for new trade regulations. Our private sector has to know and understand the rules before they happen, and be given the possibility of collaborating in the discussion so that they can be applied. Rules, even if they are very good, that have been done for the European market in organic, do not really correspond to the realities on the ground. If you see the pictures on the right, you will see that I have worked out in the chocolate industry. I believe chocolate is a sector that really unites the ACP, because we have good chocolate in the Pacific, in Vanuatu, in the Caribbean, all over the place, Dominican Republic, Trinidad, Grenada, Belize, Haiti. So, and we want to link all of these value chains to the tourism industry. It's sad that a lot of the people come to our countries and do not necessarily eat, drink, listen Caribbean. And this is why at the bottom of this, you see a trip that we did with Caribbean Export to learn about the massage industry, basically trying to link also the local agricultural industry to the tourism, including oils, creams, etc., used in massage. And definitely something that was touched by the presenters a lot is the ease of movement of persons in CARIFORUM, between CARIFORUM and the EU, and also between CARIFORUM itself. I did a lot of the traveling that I did in the Caribbean because my father was from Uruguay and I have an Uruguayan passport. But if without that, I wouldn't have been able to participate in many negotiations held in Brussels or in the own CARIFORUM regions. We had to work towards allowing that free movement of business people. Going forward, I think that we would like really to work toward creating, enabling the private sector to participate actively in the execution of the agreement and also the execution of also the post-Cotonou agreement. That revised Georgetown agreement talks about the creation of an ACP business forum. This business forum was already in Cotonou, but it was seen as an ACP one. Now is ACP-EU, now is OACPS, which we will hope to work with the European Union. Work done by CARICHAM, done by the CARICOM private sector organization, done by ADO-Expo, going the sense there have been many meetings. I also wanted to congratulate the work that was done in conciliation and arbitration done by Fedo Cámaras and Haiti Chamber of Commerce together with the Centro de Resolución de Controversias, La Cámara and the Chamber of Arbitration of Haiti. This was sponsored by the European Union. There in the photographs you would see the ambassador of the EU in Haiti in the time of the signature. The coalition of service industries also was something that has helped a lot. I think Diana Moore is going to speak later with that, and also Alison Francis worked a lot. We would like to promote innovation and intellectual property and the application of Protocol 3 on cultural cooperation. The photos that you see on the side also reflect or showcase a lot of the work that was done. I wanted to commend at that time, remember two people, the former NAO of Dominican Republic that worked a lot in that, and also Mrs. Jenny Polanco that worked a lot both in promoting regional integration, and unfortunately they passed away given COVID. So I just wanted to say that. Really thanks to a lot of the people that accompanied the Caribbean in this route. I think that the European Union has been a great partner, but among partners we have to tell us the truth. And I think that this seminar and the study works towards identifying the shortcomings and really going forward. Also, you see the photograph of the celebration of the 10 years of EPA with Clara Kanska, which invited me to this, and my former team in Dominican Republic, which I'm very happy that I'm here. Having said that, at the end, I just said that we are working together, all of us, CARICOM, CARIFORUM, the ACP, the European Union, and Caribbean Export, and other agencies to promote national competitiveness. Together, we will hope to promote a real strong regional market, hopefully collaborate at the all ACP level, and with God's help, we will conquer the world. I wanted to finish by saying gracias, thank you, merci, merci, obrigado, thank you, jarejov, asante, and binaka, at your service. I hope you understood my very fast English.
Thank you, SPC, and thank you for your thoughts and for your conclusions, particularly that they come from your very extensive and truly impressive experience with our EPA and with the region. I would like to perhaps only point to one of your conclusions that I find particularly important, which is development of regional value chains. This is one of the basic conditions for successful trading, not only with Europe, but with any trade partner, really. Moving on, now I wanted to invite to share her thoughts and experiences on EPA, a representative of one of very few European business support organizations in the region, namely EuroCham TT. Marie-Louise Norton-Murray She is a founding member who served as the first president of EuroCham TT. Now she continues with this entity as a director on the board with the responsibility for advocacy and European affairs. Marie-Louise, please take the floor.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, Marie-Louise, we can.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. All protocols observed. Firstly, we would like to thank the EU delegation, the CARIFORUM Secretariat and Caribbean Export for hosting this webinar and for giving us the opportunity to provide our feedback on the evaluation of the EPA. We welcome the timing of this webinar as the region is recovering from the pandemic and reflecting on opportunities for economic recovery. We hope that this evaluation will bring renewed focus on the EU-CARIFORUM EPA. Okay, just allow me to give a brief introduction on the European Business Chamber in Trinidad and Tobago. EuroCham TT was established in 2013, the same year the EPA was assented to by the Parliament in Trinidad and Tobago. We are a private sector, membership-driven organization supporting European business operating in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as local companies representing European brands and professional service providers and exporters doing business with Europe. We are involved in three main areas of activity: advocacy, trade support, and climate action. Most of our time, however, and effort has been in supporting market access and advocating for the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. We're part of a global network of European business organizations comprising over 40 members and growing on every continent of the globe. In this region, there are a number of EBOs in Central America, as well as South America and Canada, and the Dominican Republic. There's also interest in Jamaica and at the regional level to establish new European business organizations to represent EU companies scattered across the region. EuroCham TT is an advocate for the EU-CARIFORUM EPA for many reasons. Firstly, the EU and CARIFORUM share values on sustainable development. The EPA for us provides a very comprehensive reference on the commitments that CARIFORUM and EU governments have made to significantly improve business climate. We believe that even if the tariff reductions are the last commitments implemented by CARIFORUM governments, implementing the legal, regulatory, and cooperation commitments would significantly improve the investment environment. When it comes to trade, the agreement is not focused on manufacturing, but rather the much bigger potential of trade and investment in services, with special cooperation on eco-innovation and renewable energy, cultural industries, tourism, as well as cooperation in agriculture and fisheries, all sectors of interest. Additionally, we need to keep in mind that the EU market still represents a significant share of CARIFORUM exports, from as high as 30% in 2009 to around 18% for goods in 2018, and 30% share of service exports. This is still significant. As a supplier, 12% share of imports from the EU in 2013 is still significant. And this figure may, in fact, as reported, may be higher as many of the companies import from the EU via the US market to take advantage of higher efficiencies in logistics in the US. It may be also interesting to note that under the Canadian trade agreement with Europe, there may be possible logistics to explore further, especially where it comes to the airline industry, airline cargo. So given the significance of the EU as a partner and the importance of the EPA, we are concerned with the continuing lack of transparency in the local legislation and regulations about the EPA and reducing tariffs, as well as a lack of implementation. At present, Eurosham TT relies on the publication of the EPA and the applicable rates, which have been published in the official journal of the European Union, as well as the access to markets database and other EU publications. We believe the EPA should continue to serve as a guide for all development cooperation between the EU and the CARIFORUM states, and whether funding originates from the EPA purse, the ACP purse, the national indicative programs, or through other agencies or co-funding where the EU is the main donor, some reference should be made to the EPA. On specific findings and recommendations of the evaluation report, we would like to highlight the following 5 areas: the business environment, commitments on investment, quality and phytosanitary requirements, cultural industries, and tourism. Regarding the regulatory commitments, we fully agree to recommendation 9 that more emphasis should be placed on improving the business environment in general, and especially the barriers in sectors of interest. As reported, the World Bank Doing Business scores, which reflect the ease of doing business of CARIFORUM countries, range from 70th to 165th out of 190 countries. This is not good, especially for countries needing foreign direct investment. We do recognize, however, that there is significant effort taking place. For example, in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, there's been digitization of many of the regulatory procedures and the single electronic window, TT BizLink. These efforts took place before COVID, and I think during COVID, a lot has expanded in terms of digitization. And these efforts have all improved the application process for work permits, import licenses, company registration, e-tax, among other procedures that are important to investors. However, despite these efforts, there's still much to do in terms of trade facilitation, customs administration, the regulatory environment to promote renewable energy, waste management, fisheries, and other sectors. On investments, given the need and interest of all the CARIFORUM countries for investment and economic diversification, it is surprising, as reported, that the EPA parties have not initiated further negotiations on investment. It would be extremely useful to have a consolidated reference in one place on investment cooperation, and it would also be an opportunity to promote, for example, transparency in processes for selection of operators under various types of contracts, such as the public-private partnership agreements or performance-based contracts, build own lease transfer, etc., for major infrastructure, utilities, and, for example, even port operations. It would be an opportunity also for parties to the agreement to review the reservations that they have made in the EPA. And it would be an opportunity also to review national treatment standards for investors, including the access to incentives, an opportunity to review dispute resolution options, repatriation of funds. The EPA also includes cooperation on tax matters. There are articles about tax policy and cooperation on tax administration. And it may be an opportunity to coordinate with the ongoing work among the CARIFORUM states on tax governance. Read the OECD Global Forum on transparency and information exchange for tax purposes, special economic zones, discussions on base erosion and profit sharing, and Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters. These all contribute to improving the regulatory environment for EU investors. On the question of quality and phytosanitary requirements, for market access to the EU, CARIFORUM goods need to improve packaging, labeling, and meet EU health, safety, and quality standards. We are aware of this, and meeting standards may require major investment to improve processes, training, upgrading of plant and equipment. With this in mind, one-off projects are not enough. Support should focus firstly on the types of products of interest, as mentioned in the report. So the types of products of interest to the EU, including cultural, natural, and high quality products, art, fashion, cocoa, coconut, avocado, etc., essential oils, hot pepper-based products, fruit-based products, and fisheries, and of course, continuing whatever support is required in the traditional exports, such as banana, rum, sugar. Support to companies for quality certification has to be extended to 2 to 5 years, given that many of them before certification may require major investment in plant and equipment. National governments may consider including quality and food safety certification in their national indicative programs to allow for ongoing support. Additionally, it may be useful to provide technical assistance in identifying technical standards that must be met in the EU itself. So, for example, the EU's Access to Markets database is a great tool for statistics and market research and a good place to start on regarding the requirements for accessing the EU market. However, navigating the references to many regulations is not easy, and interpreting the standards may also require technical support. A few comments on the cultural industries. We agree there is growing interest and potential for increasing exports and collaboration in the cultural industries, and not only music, film, digital animation, and audio visual industries, but also the festivals such as Carnival and the related technology, and publications, as well as heritage and monuments, all of which are covered in the EPA and have generated interest by European operators. On the question of development assistance and funds, this is a sector again that would benefit from greater support at national level as well. That is some decentralization of funding. While CARIFORUM countries could share experts and collaborate on overall project design and reporting, it may be more effective if implementation responsibilities are at the national level, with additional support coming from the national institutions and possibly corporate sector. CARIFORUM countries by now would have had their cultural workers a lot more organized and registered compared to 2008. For example, the artists registry and the film directory, these may have been initiatives started under the EPA, but now they have taken a life of their own. In the case of the artist registry in Trinidad and Tobago, there's a tax incentive offered to companies that invest in the cultural industries, and particularly in artists that are registered. And these registries are now available online and free to artists for registration. We support that many in the cultural industries are still probably not aware of the protocol on cultural cooperation and the opportunities promoted, and therefore, again, we support that more awareness is required. Regarding reducing tariffs, in fact tariffs, we believe that the cultural workers, with the exception of the film industry, are not benefiting from the reduced tariffs. For example, artists, supplies for artists and photographers, photographic paper, fine art paper, canvases, inks, and other art and photographic supplies they all attract duties, and sometimes as high as 20% plus the 12.5% in VAT. And again, these are sectors which are growing in importance and growing in interest for collaboration with European operators, and they're a lot more organized. Finally, comments on the tourism sector. While we agree with the report, which suggests that the EPA is not likely to be a deciding factor for investment in tourism, we believe the section on tourism in the EPA provides opportunities to explore further. Of particular interest are transfer of technology, and particularly the EU sharing experience in areas such as heritage tourism, capacity building for environmental management in tourism, tourism exchange programs and training, including language training for tourism service providers. These all provide opportunities for collaboration. Finally, we do hope there will be renewed interest and focus on the EPA going forward, as some of the brightest minds in the region were brought together to negotiate for the region, and the agreement continues to be truly relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Louise. Thank you for your thoughts and for your presentations. I think that from our side,
I didn't realize it was not on because it was on before.
I did not. Okay. I think
Sorry,
that from our side,
was on before, but I didn't realize it wasn't on during the presentation because it was on before we started. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you. And I would like to thank you for your presentation. And I think that on our side, we next to working on improvement of private sector in the region, we also should focus part of our efforts on making sure that we have a well-developed network of European business support organizations active here in the Caribbean as well. I can see that there is a couple of questions asked, and I'm just reading them from my mobile. One of the questions comes from civil society forum member. What is the impact of social networks on financial services? The trade could use a Chinese mode like Alibaba, Amazon on trade with EU and the rest of the world. I think that this question is of like a lesser relevance to this very session. However, we will follow this up individually with the attendee.
Yeah, no, I can respond to part of that. We have programs together with the European Union for digital economy and also platforms to sell. In fact, Caribbean Export created a platform to promote Caribbean products worldwide. Recently, a program called Trade.com started working with the Dominican Association of Chacabana Producers, well, the clothing I'm wearing today, to promote Dominican fashion. And yes, there are platforms that are being created. GIZ has a special program working on COVID relief measures that they're implementing throughout the Caribbean. So yes, there are many initiatives that are joined to the ACP EU on digital economy, not necessarily using a platform from another country, but trying to develop regional platforms. Also, ITC has worked with the Commission on us in that. So.
Thank you, Espicion, and it's important that this aspect is also covered. There's also a general question about the contact information of our beloved panelists and experts, and I think that this will be made available by the organizers, by the Caribbean Export, and so I would like to thank you once again for your presentations, and I know that we are running a little bit behind the schedule. So with this, I will close this session and I will allow Jo Ellen to lead us to the next session that I believe will be a more specific focus on trade in goods. Thank you once again.
Gracias, se me cuidan, ¿eh? Abrazo a todo el mundo. Pasé un buen après-midi. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. So our next session, where are we? Our next session, lessons from trading goods under the EPA, defining ownership of the agreement. This session will be moderated by Dr. Damie Sinanan, who's the Manager for Competitiveness and Export Promotion from Caribbean Export. So I'll hand it over to Damie and he will do the necessary introductions and so forth.
Thank you very much, Joellen. Well, as Adam noted, we're running a bit behind schedule, so I'll jump right into it. We're going to try to bring us back onto schedule so we can finish as close to 12 p.m. as possible, which is our scheduled ending time. The title of this particular webinar, of this particular section, is Lessons Learned from Trading Goods under the EPA, Defining Ownership of the Agreement. And we have a very distinguished panel with us. I'll just take a moment to introduce everyone. First of all, we have Mr. Vaughan Renwick, who is the CEO of the West Indies Rum and Spirit Producers Association, known as WISPA. In that role, he provides trade and technical advisory services to the sector. He is responsible for implementation of a program of capital investment and capacity development for the industry and creation and promotion of the authentic Caribbean rum mark as a seal of quality and provenance for the benefit of rum producers. He began his career with the government of Grenada, where he was served as the Director of Trade at the Senior Office in the Ministry of Finance, and was instrumental in the formation of the Grenada Bureau of Standards. Following this, he joined the Caribbean Community Secretariat and was integrally involved with the early development of the CARICOM single market and economy. Following that, he had a stint in Brussels as the Minister Counselor of the Eastern Caribbean States Mission, following which he joined Caribbean Export Development Agency and then moved on to WISPA. Vaughan is a graduate of the Reading University in the UK with a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, first class honours, and a Master of Science in Alternative Energy with distinction. Here we have Mr. Ronald Ramjatan, who is the CEO, founder of Baron Foods, one of the region's leading agro-processing firms. Ron has a bachelor degree in chemistry from the University of Guyana and couples that with vast knowledge and experience in the food manufacturing industry. Guided by his drive for quality and excellence in his every endeavor, Baron Foods began with a staff of 23 personnel, producing a range of 12 products, but today it has grown to over 150 products and has all the most stringent food safety standards certified, including FSSC 22000, the V4. Ronald's stellar leadership has foreseen Baron Foods into providing innovative Caribbean-style products of the highest quality and superior presentation. He's the recipient of the 2014 birthday honors and was appointed to the Order of the British Empire. He's also a past president of the St. Lucia Manufacturers Association and chairman of the National Export Council in St. Lucia. Thirdly, we have Mr. Ferry Banke. I hope I did you justice, Ferry, who has been working in the international trade promotion since 2011 and is considered an expert in market access and sourcing. Consulting for exporters and business support organizations and empowering SMEs to approach international markets is the core. He has been working closely with the EU, national and regional level institutions, and has directed support companies from more than 40 companies in strengthening their export position and international networks. The food sector and EU market access his focus is on the food sector and EU market access. And in 2016, he joined the team of the German Trade and Development Program Import Promotion Desk, IPD. And in 2019, he supported Caribbean export on the hosting of our EU-CARIFORUM Business Forum. Finally, we have Mr. Hugo Ramirez Risk, who comes to us from the Dominican Republic. Hugo has a Doctor of Law and a Magnum Cum Laude from the Universidad Iberoamericana. He also has postgraduate diplomas from the Brussels Institute, as well as the National University of Chile, as well as MIT. He has been a professor since 1992 of economic legislation and international trade and commercial law. Right now, he's the executive director of Dominic's Quality Consulting, and he previously served as the lead for the Coca cluster for the Dominican Republic at the IDB. So welcome all our presenters. I would like to first turn it over to Mr. Vaughan Renwick, CEO of WISPA, who will sort of give us his experiences with the EPA, and then I will turn it over to all the other presenters. I invite you once again, if you have any questions, please direct it to the questions tab. So Vaughn, over to you.
Okay, morning everyone. It's good to be here. Thanks for the invitation. So I'm Vaughn Rennick. I am representing this morning the West Indies Rum and Spirits Producers Association. I want to thank Caribbean Export for putting on this seminar. Say hello to my fellow panelists. I hope I'm going to be brief this morning. I want to say generally, before we start off, the WSPA, the rum industry, really appreciates the support from governments and the EU for a whole host of different kinds of support, financial support in the past, support on some of our trade advocacy issues. It's been a long and I think very fruitful relationship. A quick comment on the study. I think we got it recently. I mean, I want to say that I'm very pleased that they thought it necessary to do a case study on rum. I would say that had we been involved in the case study, the analysis and the recommendations would have been, I think, a lot more incisive. It's good to be recognized, but the recommendations are a little general, and I think that's due to a lack of involvement, deeper involvement of the sector in the development of the case study. But I don't want to discuss the report. We want to talk about rum. So the rum industry is our largest agro-based export from CARIFORUM to Europe. I'm happy to say that over the last 5 years, we had something like a 30% increase in exports. Generally, there has been a very good movement from commodity bulk to value-added and branded product. We're seeing a lot more branded product in the market, and we've seen a lot of excitement about rum. As you know, rum is important for governments. It's a big provider of foreign exchange, a big employer, and it's one of our premium products that shows our best face internationally. Not only that, in our domestic economies, we have strong links with tourism because when visitors come to our countries, they want to experience what the Caribbean is about. The heritage of the rum industry and the sugar industry are very important parts of that. We position ourselves in the market in terms of the products we present in a premium positioning, which is really still a niche market based on authentic origin and authentic heritage. So it's very important that for rum, just like for all quality spirits all over the world, that premium niche is important and we need to protect it. We take a long view on our relationship with Europe that goes much earlier, of course, than the EPA. Goes right back to Lomé in 1975 when we first negotiated duty-free access to the European Union. We experienced, I think, one of the early products to experience liberalization of the market around about 2000. That was a surprise and a shock. So we found all of a sudden that instead of a gradual liberalization like most of our commodities were experiencing, we had, out of an agreement between the European Union and the US, a very rapid liberalization that put us into competition with a whole host of new non-traditional suppliers. Now, this early liberalization for us saw rapid growth in non-traditional suppliers, and that is in fact has impacted negatively on us in the market for a couple of reasons I'll say in a while. And even though I talk about 30% increase in value exports over the last 5 years, that hides in fact a significant decrease over the first decade of this century, where the non-traditional suppliers made big inroads into the market. Over the period, though, since Cotonou and now the EPA, we've benefited from support from CARIFORUM and the EU that has allowed the sector to modernize and to upgrade, and allowed us to mount education programs in the European Union and farther afield to teach people about rum and what our unique selling point is. So I would say for us, the challenges in the European market are really all about authenticity, how we protect our unique selling point. And in the liberalization of the market, you have a sharp increase in so-called premium products that come into the market, position themselves as premium, but don't have the heritage and the authentic provenance behind them. So a big part of what we do, our response to this challenge is education, and advocacy. So we educate influencers, we educate people in the trade. Advocacy, we relate a lot to CARIFORUM and to the European Commission to tell them that despite the fact that they have strong and good rum regulations, a lot of brands, new brands coming into the market are not compliant with those regulations. On the other side, part of that big rise in non-traditional suppliers, of course, is fueled by subsidies. We estimate that something like 80% of global alcohol is produced under subsidy regimes. Those subsidies either go to the sugarcane sector or they go direct to producers. The most famous of these is the cover-over regime, which funnels hundreds of millions of dollars to producers in Puerto Rico and the USVI. So much so that producer of rum in Puerto Rico will receive about $3 a liter for rum exported to the US that has cost them $1.50 to produce. Get your heads around those numbers. And that gives you a lot of extra cash that you can push product into the European market and get and use that money to promote it. So that's where we're seeing this is a sharp end of subsidies, where money that's coming out of another market is being pushed into new markets to grow exports. So these are some of the challenges we have. I think that we have a long way to go in this battle. I think the EPA agreement is a great framework for us to advocate to the European Union. It provides an avenue, and we are continually grateful to CARIFORUM and the EU for listening to us. We would like to see stronger action on the part of the EU, but that's a gradual thing, and we'll continue working on it. So I think with that, I'll stop now and pass on to the other panelists. Thank you.
Riyadh, I'm not getting the volume. Let's see. That's me.
Amy, I guess we couldn't hear you all.
Yeah, still not hearing him.
Yeah. We're still not hearing.
Sorry, Ron, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, you can go ahead, Ron. Perfect.
That's me, Ronald Ramchitan, right?
You are Baron Foods, yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Good morning. As was said, my name is Ronald Ramchitan, and I represent Baron Foods, which is two companies based in the OECS, St. Lucia and Grenada, started its origin 30 years ago. Currently, we are exporting to over 35 countries, and we view the EU market as an important one trading under the EPA. I know there is limited time, so I would like to mention a few of our gains and in the trading in the EU market and from home and in the EU country. Firstly, we are always granted duty-free concessions to all of our goods and services, thereby giving consumers and businesses access to a wide range of high quality goods and at economical and competitive prices. Of course, we earned tremendous foreign exchange from our exports to the EU country. Whilst that is being done, we are always getting technical assistance given to our companies for label and packaging development. We are getting marketing assistance attending trade fairs and exhibitions. And whilst doing so, we keep on increasing our goods and services to the EU country. And hence, we are able, because of our presence, export to more EU countries. We started with the United Kingdom, Germany, and France. And during the middle of the COVID season last year, we saw a growth of over 35% of our sales to the EU region. Usually we have 5 and 10%, but last year, and it continues the same trend this year with the first quarter of the year nearing finish. So, and as a result of penetrating the EU countries and the visibility of our goods increasing from 5 products to over 20, we are getting access now to the socialist country, Russia. We have started exporting even to Russia because of our presence in the EU market. Meanwhile, at home, how we benefit? By doing more business in the EU, we create more jobs, we generate more income to the local suppliers who supply us with raw materials in the agro-processing industry. We create value-added goods to sell in EU member country. This EPA agreement allows us, the manufacturers, to use a simpler rules of origin by importing goods from member CARIFORUM country and ACP, thus allowing our products to move up the value chain. So at all stages, we export high quality goods. We are competitive. We try to be focused on the market, delivering on time. And this has allowed us to experience that growth that we are getting. Last year, we were able to supply flavors to the EU market in container loads, which shows that there was a gap and we were able to fill that gap. It's important to us that we continue with this trend, and our certification system is assisting us because we are complying with the EU labeling legislation. It gives us access readily to the market, and compliance is simple. So at the end of it all, the Caribbean export has always held us by our hands, and especially in trading in the EU countries. We have benefited quite a lot, and we continue to benefit because to date, our entire packaging system is compliant to the EU system. So I would safely say and urge other agro-processing concerns within the CARIFORUM country to start the process. The market is big. We have increased our sales by over 35%, and still there is much more to do. Competition is strong, competition is good. It encourages us, fellow manufacturers, to improve on our quality and packaging. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. Very, very interesting. When we get to the question and answer session, I want to ask you a couple of questions about your trading in COVID times and increasing your exports.
Sure.
So we'll just move ahead now to Ferry. Ferry, I know you have a few slides first, so I've made you presenter, so you can go ahead and share your screen if you
Sure. Thank you very much. So thank you, Damie, for inviting me to this panel. Thank you, Caribbean Export Development Agency, for setting up this webinar. I think it's a very useful platform for exchange, a lot of different perspectives that are gathered here. Thank you also to the panelists that spoke before me. A warm welcome to you, and also a warm welcome to everybody else who is joining this webinar. It's an honor to be here. Today I'm speaking on behalf of the Import Promotion Desk IPD. I'm not sure if you can see my presentation.
Yes, Ferry, we can. It's not in. It's just the slides. We're not seeing the slideshow.
Okay, actually, it's supposed to be this one.
Yeah, it's
perfect.
Okay,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So just a quick introduction to complement what Amy already said. The Import Promotion Desk is a trade promotion program which is funded by the German Ministry of Cooperation and Development. We're pretty closely linked to the Association of Wholesale and Foreign Trade in Germany. So what we do is actually we support very much in the networking and the matchmaking, but also in the capacity building for small and medium-sized companies and also for BSOs. So we've been together with the GIZ and Caribbean Export Development Agency working on the forum in Frankfurt in 2019. And what was it what we did actually, just to give you an understanding of my perspective. Actually, we worked in the training of exporters, and here we covered some of the points that were mentioned before already when we heard the analysis and the report of the great EPA program. We did some capacity building, raising awareness for standards for requirements of the European market, touching on issues like marketing, etc. Actually gearing up, readying up the companies for their exchange with the European market. And this for companies from the food sector, from cosmetics, and also from creative industries. Creative industry was catered by different specialists in that case. Then on the other hand, given our strong position here in Europe and our connection to the European importers, we also provided promotion, identification, and matchmaking for European buyers. So for the forum, we invited some buyers, we connected them to the companies there. That was basically what we did. So my perspective that I'm covering, as Demi already said, is quite the European perspective and the perspective from the European market. Now, what was the key learnings, what we had? Actually, something that I really like to share whenever it goes to matchmaking and to export or trade promotion is this one. This is our major goal in the Import Promotion Desk, and I think one of the major goals of the EPA, to get a good match, good match between the offer that you have in the Caribbean and the European market. So there is certain restrictions when it comes to the European market. There are certain forms. These holes, as you see, they have certain shapes. So there is clear requirements for market access to get into this European market. If we take these blocks as exporters, and then the cube as being the European market. So it has been pointed out already before by Marie Plaisir, for example, or Marie-Louise Norton-Murray, that there is clear standards and really demanding standards in the European market. And that is quite a challenge, as we've seen, not only for the Caribbean producers, but then from producers and exporters from all over the world that we support. The challenge here is to find a good match now, to have a good set of companies that you can support through the program, bring them together with the right set of importers from the European market. And here one thing, an idea that I wanted to share with you, we have seen on the project for the CARIFORUM that there were a lot of companies with wonderful brands, with wonderful finer products. For example, Mr. Ronald as well, who participated with wonderful products that he's marketing on the European market. We have seen great producers for rum and other spirits. So a lot of finer products. However, we as the IPD program, we're taking quite a different approach when it comes to import promotion. And why that? Well, we've heard before from Mr. Cipion Oliveira about the great effort and the great investment which they did in order to promote, for example, the rum industry and the exports of rum. And our first speaker on the panel also highlighted the long-term approach that it takes to really implement or to really bring final brands to the market. And I'm sure that Ronald, you could also comment on that. It really takes a huge effort to bring your final product on the European market. And this is mainly due to the fact that the European market is pretty picky. So European markets and consumers, they request a lot of requirements. They request a lot of food standards and quality standards. On the other hand, we have a massive industry, a massive food industry, a thousands billion-dollar industry in Europe that is producing. I took the example of tea. So we have one company from tea also in the CARIFORUM EU Business Forum. And in Europe, we have big companies like Lipton, like our Twining, for example, and they are dominating the market. So those are the competitors that you face on the European market. Or when we think of chocolate, there is big producers like Nestle in Europe that are established in the market. So that's why in the IPD program for us, having the focus on finished products is a bit difficult, and we tend towards supporting natural ingredients. Natural ingredients not only as a very raw material, as the very basic step of production, but then also semi-finished products and value-added products. Ronald, you were talking about exporting flavors. Those things, for example, may offer new opportunities on the European market. That was one thing that we thought might be worth be taken into consideration for future developments and future support under the EPA program. On the other hand, offering a good match on eye level is something really essential. You have some good producers with a good production, but sometimes volumes do not match. So you have small companies that you support, that you want to support as well, and you bring them together with importers on the other hand that trade thousands of containers per month. So you have somebody who could export a pallet to somebody who is buying in containers. And we heard about the logistics issues, which is definitely an issue when trading to the Caribbean or trading with the Caribbean. That was also feedback that we got from the importers. Logistics is quite an issue. So you must be sure to find on the one hand solutions for logistics, but on the other hand, make sure that you offer matches on eye level, that you have producers with a volume that is exportable, that you have producers that offer the right set of standards that are requested, the right products that are requested, for that you can have a communication on eye level. And I think with the training which we did in Trinidad, we did a good step forward to that, like really creating awareness. But this definitely, as we also heard before, this is a long-term approach to support the companies in really getting to that level, in aligning the levels. So these just a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you. Firstly, to really offer a good match, maybe going towards more natural ingredients, taking a closer look into the selection and preparation of participants, which I think is key to have a sustainable outcome of all the endeavors that you take. Then working also on logistics wherever possible. Ronald, if I remember correctly, you had a strong position in the EU before. So when we were talking on the forum with importers, you were able to provide from outside the UK, for example, to provide to continental Europe. Those things, those trading hubs, or considering combined container loads for shipments coming from the Caribbean, those things might offer opportunities for smaller companies as well. And then last but not least, a point that we figured out was your visibility, the visibility of the EPA, but also the visibility of the countries. So we had the wonderful forum in Frankfurt, and just a couple of weeks later, we had one of the major, or the biggest trade fair for food and drinks in Cologne, the Anuga Trade Fair. So while we were running this event in Frankfurt, the other event in Anuga was pretty much unattended by Caribbean producers. And I think that is a point that should be taken into consideration to really benefit from existing business platforms. I know it might be a bit ridiculous to talk about trade fairs right now, but actually trade fairs are the platform that European importers prefer to make their business contacts and to meet potential suppliers. So there is major trade fairs in Europe when it comes to cosmetics, when it comes to spirits, also for music and digital arts, WARMEX, the World Music Expo. We've been speaking to companies from the creative industries, and they did not go to this trade fair, where these networks really providing wonderful platforms for exchange and a great visibility over the years as well to create a strong base and a strong presence in Europe. And with that, I'd like to give the word back to Damie and to the rest of the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ferry, for those insights from the perspective of the European side about how we can increase trade with the CARIFORUM. Just wanted to say that, you know, Caribbean Export agrees with you regarding the trade fairs. We were actually scheduled to be at CL Paris last year, WOMEX last year, hopefully Anuga this year, but when things get back to normal, I think that's definitely a strategy that we will be proceeding. So what I'd like to do is to turn it over to our final panelist, Mr. Hugo Ramirez Risk, to give us some insight from him, give us some of his insights. Hugo? Hugo, we can't hear you. I'm not sure if you're on mute.
Am I right now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Yes.
Thank you very much, all of you, my colleagues, and especially thanks to our dear friends at Caribbean Export for organizing this relevant, important panel, looking towards the future of cooperation in the region. And especially thanks to, I want to thank Mr. Percival Marie for his attendance to this important discussion. My name is Hugo Ramirez, and I am a private sector consultant who has been trained for many years in designing and supervising and implementing development programs under the European Development Funds and other cooperations facilities towards development in the Caribbean. I've been working for the last few years as an advisor to the Coconut Cluster of the Dominican Republic, which is an association of approximately today 744 families of producers, processors, and exporters of coconut products from the Dominican Republic, which was founded in the year 2010. The cluster was founded based actually on an advice that was given to us by our very dear friend Tayana Mora, who will be speaking shortly to us about the need to assess the problematic of the coconut industry in the Caribbean. And then later in 2013, we were able to consolidate the coconut cluster of the DR. Thanks to the assistance of Caribbean Export, and in particular, my dearest friend, Escipion Oliveiro, who led us to the gatherings in Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana that were organized by CARDI under a specific program that was developed by the European Union to support the sector in all the CARIFORUM countries, coconut producers, CARIFORUM countries. At that time, between 2012 and 2013, a group of the coconut producers in the region gathered in Trinidad and later in Port of Spain and later in Guyana, to propose a strategy for the development of the coconut industry in the Caribbean. Actually, a group of associations of coconut producers created in 2013 what we called the CARIFORUM Coconut Steering Committee, which was aimed to develop an institution, a regional institution, to promote the development of the sector in the region, focusing innovation and exports to Europe and the United States and the rest of the world overall. So by that time, this CARIFORUM Coconut Cluster was incorporated and legally registered in the Dominican Republic, conforming a group of associations, including Guyana, Belize, Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados, and the Dominican Republic, and Haiti, of course. Then in 2014, a project was set up to support the coconut industry with a budget of about 6.6 million euros and was to be executed by the International Trade Center from Geneva under a contract with an alliance with CARDI. For a couple of years, we developed a relationship with the project and found out, as Cipion said at the beginning of his intervention today, that amongst partners, which is where we are now, we must speak the truth. The project was not in, let's say, was not within the interest of the Dominican Republic stakeholders in the coconut industry, as we had a problematic that we needed to address, which I will explain to you in 1 minute. The DR has not planted new coconuts for the last 20 years. So our plantations, which are basically formed of 5 million coconut trees, are old. They are over 60 years old. Almost 80% of them are between 60 and 100 years old. So they are not producing coconuts anymore. So the reality right now is that the DR is importing coconuts from Guyana at the level of about 56 million coconut units per year to produce our, basically to our industries, to produce our coconut milk, our coconut piña colada, etc., which are exported basically to the European Union and the US at a value of approximately $45 million a year. Now, the total production of the Dominican Republic of coconuts is 80 to 100 million units of coconuts per year. And yet, we are exporting to Haiti last year 56 million fresh coconuts for the Haitian market, for the Haitian people. So we are importing from Guyana the same amount that we are exporting to Haiti. So we're sending the fresh fruits from Haiti from our farms to Haiti and importing the same amount from Guyana to be used in our industries. Now, we presented this problematic in 2014 to the ITC program, and they believed that they wanted to insist on a country-by-country approach to the problematic instead of a regional one. So, as we in the DR did not agree with the proposal of the consultants, we decided to request assistance, technical and financial assistance from the Inter-American Development Bank. We got a grant for about $500,000, and we decided to set up our own 10-year-long development program for the industry. So for a couple of years, we used that money to develop a plan with the Haitian partners, and we have come up with a strategy to, let's say, resuscitate the coconut industry in the Dominican Republic. How are we doing this? We are cutting down 1.5 million trees of the 5 million trees that we have, senile trees, that is trees that are over 60 years old to 100 years old, not producing coconuts anymore. We're cutting 1.5 million of those trees and planting 3.5 million, 3 trees per 1 cut, of new varieties and plantations in the Dominican Republic side of the island. And we're also planting half of that, 1-point-something million in Haiti, in order to reduce the demand from our fresh fruits in the east side of the island. So this joint project will allow us to produce enough wood, precious wood, from the trees that we are cutting, senile trees that we are cutting, produce precious wood and produce charcoal. We will be producing about 13.5 million square meters of precious coconut wood, Caribbean precious coconut wood from the Dominican Republic, which in terms of technical specs, it's about 276 million board feet of coconut wood. This has the economic potential to pay for replanting the whole Dominican Republic with new coconuts and to produce a huge amount of charcoal, of green charcoal that could substitute the deforestation and the problems and the supply of charcoal that Haiti requires on a year-to-year basis. So the idea would be that we could transport this concept to a completely regional one, including the 9 countries in the Caribbean that has been historically producers of coconut, and that their industries can be restored again within a short period of times based on new varieties that can produce the fruit between 26 months to 4 years instead of the old concept of coconuts need 7 years to be grown. So this whole regional concept of the project would allow us, as Scipion mentioned earlier, several benefits in terms of EPA and in terms of other free trade agreements that Haiti in particular is a part of. The issue of cumulation of rules of origins is vital for the production of innovative products such as coconut sugar, coconut flour, coconut spirits, coconut other products that are not currently being produced in the Dominican Republic, but by the accumulation rules, we could benefit from all of these enhanced products. Also, it would imply definitely custom cooperation proceedings, since, for instance, if you buy a coconut in one of my farms, in one of our farms in the Dominican Republic, you will pay 25 pesos for a fruit. When you take the same coconut from the farm to the merchant in Port-au-Prince in Haiti, the same coconut will be bought by Haitian people in Port-au-Prince at 150 pesos, which is basically the increase in price basically caused because of customs mishandling of the trade of the whole business. So we expect that the project will enhance cooperation at customs level to avoid the increase of the prices of the products and reduce the cost for the people in Haiti to purchase the 56 million coconuts that they buy every year, and that is maybe 5 coconuts per person per year. So it's relevant in terms of economics. Of course, this would also help to the sustainability of the bilateral development agenda. If we can create one commodity through which the 2 countries can develop together and pass over to the rest of the region the same experience and implement it all together, definitely the results will be geometrically potentialized. Also, it would help with the early alert systems to be implemented that need to be implemented in terms of diseases and plagues regarding the production and processing of coconut. And most importantly, it will support the development of new strategies of integration using techniques for intercropping coconut with cacao, chocolate, coconut with vanilla, with other bamboo, other let's call it short-term return products that could be used in the farms while the coconuts are ready to be exported or processed. So at the end, I would say there's a need for the new cooperation to take into account the efforts and the plans of the private sector as a region rather than as an individual country one by one. We would need to focus, in our point of view as Coconut Cluster of the DR, we would need to focus all possible assistance at a regional level, because it doesn't matter how much coconut we plant in the DR. For the next 10 years, we won't have coconut. We will need to continue to import from Guyana and later from Belize and later from other countries, because the plants that we will be setting up in the next 5 years will take 10 years to produce the coconut. So we need to design a strategy at a regional level to comply with the exports that we historically have in the world market in these precious areas. So those are basically my comments, and I would be open to any question to it.
Again, we cannot hear you, Damie.
Sorry, yes, thank you very much, Ugo. We appreciate it. Very, very good information about the coconut cluster in the Dominican Republic. All right, we're running a bit behind. We have one more panel left and we have 15 minutes left for the webinar, so I'm sure we will go over a little. But I do want to ask, I mean, I think we can have time for one question to the panel. There are 3 questions I'm seeing. We can answer the others in the chat. But Vaughn, are you still on?
Yes, I'm definitely very much here.
Okay, great. We have a question from Ms. Sylvia Charles. Is it feasible for the rum industry to use geographical indicators to differentiate the product?
Yes, certainly. And in fact, some countries are pursuing geographical indications. A prerequisite for a geographical indication that's going to make a difference to you overseas is a geographical indication in your own native country. And so that's where you start. Some of the larger countries that have more established exports to the EU, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, are working on GIs. In fact, Guyana has already a GI, and so does Jamaica, and both of them are in discussions with the EU. Barbados is not as advanced. The Dominican Republic is working hard on a bit more, a stronger, a sort of super GI, which is really a denomination of origin. But there are other IP instruments that could be used that relate more to trademark law, certain types of trademark protection. And all countries, I mean, it's a resource intensive thing going for a GI, because it's not just getting the agreement in place. It's the cost of managing it and all of that. So smaller countries with fewer suppliers, fewer producers could find that onerous. And so from an overall point of view of the Caribbean, we always consider that our authentic Caribbean mark, developed in the mid-2000s, was a sort of precursor to a pan-CARIFORUM mark of identity, which could eventually either become a GI or a group trademark, and that could give us similar sort of protection. But really, before you get into a GI, you have to decide what your objective is. Is it value? Is it IP protection? You need to be very hard about why you want to go for it. And that's where I think sometimes people don't do that process and then get into something without sort of thinking it through. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Vaughn. We do have a few other questions, but in the interest of time and fairness to the other panel, I'm going to end there. We will try to respond to it in the chat. So on behalf of Caribbean Export, the EU delegation, and CARIFORUM, I'd like to thank the members of the panel for their contributions this morning and for taking the time to be here. It was indeed a pleasure, and I wish you all the best of the day. And I'd like to turn it back over to Joellen. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Riyadh.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Damie, and thank you very much to the panelists. So now, as he mentioned, we are obviously still trying to get back on track. But our next session, which is focused on services, So trading services and investments, tapping untapped potential. This session, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I can.
This session will be moderated by Alison Francis, Services Specialist at the Caribbean Export Development Agency. And so I'll hand over to Alison to do the introductions of the session and the panelists and so forth. Over to you.
Okay, good morning and thank you very much, Joellen, and welcome to everyone here. We are quite short on time, so I will not delay any further, but just to reinforce, the importance of services and to reiterate what was stated by our executive director this morning in terms of, pushing on the non-tourism services as a, put it in my words, the new engine for resilience for the economies within the Caribbean. And I think that is a very important thing that we need to address, how we can insert services more strategically and in a greater level of importance for the services sector within the region. We have a very renowned panel here with us, and without further ado, I'll go straight into the introductions. So we have first with us, and Benedict, do my apologies. I hope I do justice to your name. We have Mr. Benedict Weidehofer, who joined the International Relations Department of Business Europe in February 2018. He works on Africa, EU-UK relations, development-related issues, trade in services, and implementation of EU free trade agreements. Moreover, he's a member of the Domestic Advisory Group under the EU FTAs with Central America and Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador, and of the Consultative Committee established under the EU-CARIFORUM Economic Partnership Agreement. Before joining Business Europe, he completed traineeships in the Trade Policy Department of the European Parliament, and as part of his bachelor studies, the German Embassy in Dublin and the Siemens Government Affairs Office in Brussels. He holds a master's degree in global political economy from the University of Technology, Dresden, and a bachelor's degree in European studies from the Catholic University. During his studies, he also spent one semester at the Catholic University of Chile, Santiago de Chile, and a semester at the University de Nantes in France. Benedict is German, speaks English, French, and Spanish fluently, and have a good level of Italian as well. We also have with us Ms. Tiana Mora, who has 30 years of experience in export development and export promotion of both goods and services. She has worked for more than 22 years for the public and private organizations throughout the Caribbean, including strategies, policy advisor, capacity building, and export training and export plan development, especially for services export, including creative industries. She was executive director of the Caribbean Export Development Agency. She is currently the managing director of Next Consulting International consulting firm, specialized in development cooperation and international trade. Tiana Mora is a director of the Dominican Republic Coalition of Services and vice president of the Latin American Association of Services Exporters, ALICE, on the board of directors. She has assisted more than 500 companies and organizations through training, coaching, advice, and international marketing. Through her consultancy, she has promoted and facilitated the establishment of 5 organizations relating to services export. She has extensive experience in markets in the Caribbean, US, and Europe. Ms. Mora has postgraduate study in marketing and graduate study in communications. She has been a presenter in multiple international fora and events in Caribbean and Europe. She is author of 5 books, including 2 studies on the Dominican Republic Strategy for the Caribbean Commission and published by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Dominican Republic. One co-authored a recent publication on the history of 30 years of EU cooperation in the DR with Glasgow University. We also have with us Dr. Karen Niles, who is currently a lecturer with the Institute of International Relations at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. Dr. Niles conducts research not only on climate change and the energy sector, but also on cultural industries as a pathway to low carbon growth. Dr. Karen Niles is also the managing director of Core Green Limited, a firm dedicated to commercializing creative content throughout the Caribbean. Coral Green provides management, marketing, and research support to creative professionals who wish to find new markets for the content they produce and or expand the consumption of their works within the markets in which they are already present. Prior to that appointment, he was employed by the business unit manager as a business unit manager for research and policy at the Economic Development Advisory Board of Trinidad and Tobago. Within his portfolio, Dr. Niles has responsibility for promoting and facilitating economic diversification, particularly with respect to the creative sector and the energy sector. Our final panelist is Ms. Camille Sylvain Abrams. Camille Sylvain is the founding director of Anime Caribe, Animation and Digital Media Festival, and the program coordinator for animation studies at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Media and Communication with specialization in animation from Goldsmith University of London. She recently served as chairman of Film TT under the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Government of Trinidad and Tobago. Together with business partners Jason Lindsay, they created the first Caribbean outsourcing animation studio called Full Circle Animation Studio in Trinidad, creating work for international studios around the world. She has coined her interpretation of the work she undertakes as digital activism, for just as the output of the computer is intangible and cannot be placed on a shelf, so does the inspiration she provokes, hiding the emotional, social, and entrepreneurial outcomes of her inventions. In 2016, she spent a month in Jamaica for an intervention project called New Path, which used animation in prisons, funded by the Organization of American States through this Department of Public Security in Washington, turning to those stories of dread and despair into constructive affirmations. She gives inmates an opportunity to express their fears, their trauma, and allow them to use storytelling to change the plot. With over 20 years in the animation and digital media industry, Camille is a project lead for the IDB-funded outsourcing studio at the university. The UTTAP Factory is an outsourcing center for audiovisual digital services for the entertainment ICT sector. That being said, I would now like to welcome all our panelists on tapping potential. I think this is a very important panel, and I hope we could do justice with the time left and that persons would remain with us and we can make the maximum use of our time. So without much further ado, I will invite Benedict, to make his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, and many thanks again for inviting us. Business Europe represents the national industry and employers federations from 35 European countries, and we are a leading voice of business on EU level. Now, the topic we're discussing in this panel is very relevant indeed, because services account for over 70% of the GDPs of our economies, and trade and services is also very important in our bilateral trade and between the EU and CARIFORUM, and its value outweighs that of trading goods. The EU is the source of 28% of CARIFORUM services imports and the destination of 30% of CARIFORUM services exports. The main sectors of CARIFORUM services exports to the rest of the world are travel services and transport services, which together account for around 90% of total services exports of CARIFORUM. And these are also amongst the key sectors in our bilateral trade and investment relations, alongside other sectors such as creative and cultural services, financial services, telecommunication, and extractive services. Now, the impact that the EPA has had on services trade is more difficult to determine than for goods, because while for goods, normally tariffs are imposed at the border and trade agreements reduce them or eliminate them, trade and services mainly depends on behind the border measures and regulation. Well, the assessment is also made more challenging by two major factors that have impacted our bilateral trade. On the one hand, due to Brexit, one of the Caribbean's main trade and investment partners within the EU28 has left the EU and the Economic Partnership Agreement, and it rolled it over bilaterally. And then we have had the COVID-19 pandemic, which has disrupted the world economy, and it has had a particularly strong impact on the most important services sectors of the Caribbean. This is highlighted by the fact that 83% of CARIFORUM services exports are delivered through mode 2, where the customer travels to the country of the service provider to consume the service. And this has, of course, become very difficult due to lockdowns and travel restrictions. But some general observations can still be made about the importance of the EPA for our trade relationships in the area of services. The liberalization of services trade in the EPA is, as I mentioned before, mainly about making sure that services regulation does not discriminate against services providers from the other party or does not exclude them. And in the services sectors that are covered by the EPA, this involves, for example, the national treatment of services providers from another party. The EPA allows companies from the other party to establish in the country's territory and operate there. It facilitates the temporary entry and stay of certain categories of professionals for business purposes. And it also includes, more cross-cutting assurances, for example, on fair competition, on intellectual property and transparency, which make services trade more easier. And through these assurances and measures, the EPA has reduced uncertainty and has contributed to improving the business environment in the Caribbean for European companies. But at the same time, because services exporters and investors operate within the regulatory environment of the importing country, a favorable investment climate more broadly is a key factor for a country's ability to seize the opportunities offered by the EPA fully. And this is even more important as 71% of CARIFORUM services imports are delivered through commercial presence of foreign services providers in the host country. And unfortunately, CARIFORUM countries, as we've heard already, rank relatively low in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index, and only 3 countries have been able to improve their ranking in the last 5 years. National regulation on services remains burdensome in many Caribbean countries and in many sectors. European investors in the Caribbean often struggle to find relevant rules and regulations or information on relevant administrative processes and permits. So this is certainly an area where the EU and CARIFORUM need to cooperate more, need to involve the private sector to identify barriers and so on. And we've heard a lot of encouraging initiatives in this regard already. I'll stop here for now. I'll say more on recommendations later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benedict. As we move on to our next presenter, Ms. Mora, Tiana Mora, you now have the floor. We continue to hear more on the experiences in the using agreement, etc. I think that's very valuable what we heard from you already, Benedict, and we look forward to hearing more on the experience using agreement and our challenges. And then as we wrap up, we look more then for opportunities and recommendations and really see what we could do about tapping. So Tiana, the floor is now yours.
Yes, thank you, Alison. Due to time, I'm going to concentrate my comments into 2 main topics. The first one, and I know it's an issue that is not exclusive of the CARIFORUM EU trade agreement, but it is an issue, which is the lack of clear implementation mechanisms for the provisions of the EPA on services. And I know it's an issue not only for us, but for other countries that have signed preferential agreements, and an issue in general dealing with the EU. We had a panel that I participated in at the WTO where some of the same issues were repeated by other countries. But it's a fact that it is not clear how do we make the promise of EPA in services. What are the procedures that we are going to follow to actually allow trade providers from the CARIFORUM region to access those preferences? One example is we have the right, if you are a professional of certain areas or creators in the creative industries, you have the right to short-term work in the EU if there's an agreement with an importer of that service. But there is no provision other than whatever EU has stipulated, which is no difference from CARIFORUM to any other service provider that is coming from any other parts of the world into the EU. So how is that preference, how is that right that the EPA gives us apply? In goods, it's very clear. If we have tariff-free access, we know that customs have to oblige by that as long as we comply with the rules of origin. So the path is clear for us to defend our rights within a trade agreement. But how do we do that in services? There is no clear mechanism. The cultural protocol is great, but how do we translate that into actual preference? Does the EPA give me faster access, or is a sure thing? How can I tell to somebody that wants to hire me that, yes, there's the EPA and gives me the right, I'm going to be there faster, or it's a sure thing that you can hire me? No, I cannot say anything of that. And I mean, I'm not going into the visa issue, which already was mentioned by the consultants that did the evaluation, but it's in fact something that constrains our assets to the preference given by the EPA. It is unique in certain issues, although agreements that came after that, like the one with Canada or Japan, has gone a little bit farther in some of the areas, but still it's a very comprehensive in services. But again, we don't have the mechanism to access that preference, that right that is given us. And until we have a clear mechanism, it's kind of like a wish list. It's really not something that we can use to actually enter the market. And I'm not going to talk about the information and the awareness because others have already addressed it. The other point that I want to make is in a lot of comments, they talk about how the Dominican Republic has been one of the countries that have benefited the most of the EPA. And it is true, but we have to differentiate, is this because of the EPA or not of the EPA? Two of the sectors that were mentioned, and I'm just going to give some of the examples. Tourism. Yes, tourism has grown a lot during that period, but what are the factors that accounts for that growth? Dominican, well, the incentive law for tourism, but other CARIFORUM countries already has that, and an aggressive efforts from Dominican banks to attract investors that would use their facilities. That has been, especially after 2008, of the financial crisis in Europe, where that loans were not available as easily. That has pushed for a fast increase in investment and in the use of loans, local loans for those investments in hotels and other tourism infrastructure. So is it because of EPA or not? The same thing, the film industry. We had perhaps one of the biggest investment example, the Pinewood Studio and the Vicini Group in the Dominican Republic have a very successful, even through the pandemic venture for filmmaking, film studio in the Dominican Republic. But the main attraction for that agreement to happen is the laws, the incentive laws for film industry in the Dominican Republic. With the certainty of the EPA facilitated, probably it was a good starting point. But without the incentive laws, I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't happen. Co-production agreement. The EPA says that we should facilitate co-production agreement, but how do we do that? How the facility within the EPA operates. Dominican Republic signed a co-production agreement with Italy. It doesn't even mention the EPA. anywhere. So, but would this co-production agreement be done under the cultural protocol of the EPA, provide a better, a more certain environment for that co-production agreement to happen? I'm not so sure. The point is that besides having the mechanism to implement the EPA, we need to have the sector development, the ecosystems to help some of our sectors develop. Filmmaking without incentives is not working. The same thing when we are approaching the animation sector, incentives for people to outsource animation services, incentives are important. So I would just, for this part, the recommendations come later, would leave with those. We need mechanisms that are to know what are the paths to access the preference given to us by the EPA in services. And the second, we need support in ensuring that we have a comprehensive sector development at the different levels that the different CARIFORUM countries are at, in order that we can tap not only into the preference, because the EU is one of the largest markets, for example, for creative industries, both as an exporter, but also as an importer. So it's important for us to consider that market.
Thank you very much, Diana. Very good points, understanding our mechanism and getting those the ecosystem, as you say, in place. So I look forward to our further discussions on that as we talk about actually tapping in and opportunities and specific recommendations that we'll make for the services sector. Without much further ado, I would like to welcome now Dr. Niles to give his input on the challenges, etc., the agreement and how we're utilizing it, and then we go on to the other part of our discussions. So Dr. Niles, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Can you see me now?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So let me get right into the no time is of the essence. What I want to say is, I'm speaking, I have to wear two hats, of course. One is as an academic, a teacher of international economic law, and someone who was working on matters related to the Economic Partnership Agreement in 2008 at the Sri Lanka Center of International Law, Policy and Services. So I have to wear the academic hat, but also I do own and run a company that aims to commercialize creative content called Green Limited. And so I'm going to speak wearing both hats, if that's okay. So number one, the first point is simple. The opportunities presented by the EPA are very real and they are tangible. I think that's a good starting point for our discussion, at least for my input. There is interest and there are real opportunities for service provision across all four modes of service trade. Happy to get into that more in our discussion if we have time for one, but across all four modes of service trade, there are indeed opportunities. But in order to take advantage of those opportunities, the second point is important. You need to realize that we can either compete or we cannot. You can either provide a service at an international standard or you cannot provide it. And so what I would say is there's certainly a lot of, so I work a lot as it relates to music in particular. And I know for a fact, and have been attending more than one international conference in the EU, I would say that there's definitely interest in Caribbean music. But I would say there has to be nuance. I understand there has to be nuance. You have to realize that the Caribbean diaspora in the EU is both a market and a source of competition. So yes, they will buy Caribbean music, but they're also Caribbean artists or artists of Caribbean descent in the EU that are cheaper to source than Caribbean artists from the Caribbean. And so that has also been a very real source of competition that I think sometimes is underestimated. One thing I would say after reading the report that is that was a bit strange was this talk about professionalization. I think that's an antiquated argument. One thing that I've heard over and over and over is just how impressed music executives and buyers have been when they actually hear our music, and even sometimes when they see our films. What they keep commenting is on the quality of the sound and the quality of the actual cinematography. That usually gets highlighted as being very, very positive. So that what I saw that in the report there, I think that was a bit off, and I'm not sure who they got those ideas from, but certainly in every single market, including in the EU, there are established players, there are emerging players, and then there are the more embryonic players who are still need to get to a certain level of quality. And so I think if you are listening to this and you are a musician or you are a service provider, you need to really self-assess and really be able to know whether or not you are able to compete at an international standard. And for music, that there are very, very clear sonic standards for sound. And either you can meet that or you can't. And the other thing to note here, of course, is that Brexit will have an impact. And that is certainly the case for music and for touring and for doing deals with companies based in the UK. I think definitely what I was trying to get more and more artists to do was to try to use the UK, particularly because both countries speak English, trying to get artists to use the UK as a bridge to get to the EU before the bridge is kind of, for want of a better word, terminated. Of course, it's not entirely terminated, but I think definitely knowing your markets is really, really important. And I can come to that later in today's discussion. But I think suffice to say, many of the practitioners within the EU, certainly ones that I've spoken to, know nothing about the EPA, like absolutely nothing. So they are interested in good music, they're interested in business, but many of them know nothing about the EPA. But that doesn't mean that there aren't benefits to the EPA, right? I think the point there to be made is that while the agreement is made between regions, it's implemented by countries. And so there's still a lot of work to be done on either side of the trade agreement. There's still a lot of work to be done, particularly within the EU member states, to kind of educate their own private sector players, certainly within the music industry, about the EPA and the benefits therein. But the point there to be made is simple. The EPA is meant to come with certain guarantees, right? And it's supposed to add legal certainty. To this day, I haven't been able to benefit really from those legal certainties, but they are there, you know. But there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of education on both sides of the agreement. So what do you need to know? And I think what we can all take away is certainly there is a need. I mean, I can come back to this, but there is a need for strong partnerships and matchmaking. That was also a recommendation in the report. But the matchmaking and twinning of agencies across the two regions, that needs to be done really, really strategically. But it can really be helpful in the creative sector, particularly in music, as it relates to touring companies. That would be really helpful to Caribbean musicians and practitioners, particularly as it relates to resolving the visa issue, right? And I mean, trade fairs, like as was mentioned earlier, WOMEX and MIDEM, they are also important, but a different type of support is required. One of the points I'll make before closing is I remember doing, so I've done now work with agencies in the UK and in Europe. And I do remember once being asked, where are you from? And I said Trinidad and Tobago. And the person said, oh, and then they went and they checked with their company and their administration. And they came back and said, do you know that your country is blacklisted? And I said, I'm aware, but that's not the global standard. The global standard is actually with the OECD. But I mean, just to kind of make sure this is clear, the report that was submitted actually that we're all commenting on actually refers to trade irritants. And one of the largest probably elephants in the room as a trade irritant is unnecessary, unjustifiable, arbitrary, and immoral blacklisting of Caribbean countries. It slows down business and it makes it harder. It creates unnecessary suspicion. So, for example, the EU has listed as high-risk third countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, Vanuatu, and Trinidad and Tobago. And that really does raise a lot of eyebrows when you're trying to do business internationally, particularly when you are introduced to music executives from other parts of the world, and then you get to know the actual business organizations in the next part of the world. It creates unnecessary suspicion in terms of them having to do additional checks, and it's actually hampered smooth payment of my own company for services rendered. It is unnecessary, it is unjustifiable, and it needs to stop. There is already a list related to compliance for the same purpose, and Trinidad and Tobago has been listed as compliant there. And so the disparity there in terms of the EU's blacklisting needs to be rectified as soon as possible. But I want to go back to this point in which I will close, which is there is certainly a lot of opportunities for Caribbean musicians, but what needs to happen, of course, is the capacity in terms of being able to put your business in order, in terms of there is a lot of paperwork that you need to get done in order to be listed as what we call either a contract service supplier or a business service supplier. There is some work that you need to do beforehand, including proper registration and proper keeping of your own records and making sure your own financial books are in order, and all of those things. That's really important. But the other thing, of course, is making sure you can provide service at the standard required in the individual markets of the EU, and knowing exactly where in the EU you want to target, because there are certain things that you need to meet, such as language barriers that you need to straddle and all of that. So I will leave it there, but I think we need to definitely look at the EU, not just as this massive block. The agreement is between two regions, but implementation is between countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Niles, for that. You made some very good points there. One of the final points you made about the internal regulation requirements and capital blacklisting, so it can limit in terms of your movement, but also made some very good points on and these are some things that we get security standpoint and tapping in on taps and billing and making a difference, so that yes, you are ready to supply that service within the European market. Without much further ado, I would like to now call on Camille Sylvan Abrams. Camille? Camille, are you hearing us?
I am. Hello?
Hello, yes. Okay, I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, so I do apologize. I've been having some major technical issues, so I'm actually calling in on my phone.
Okay.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay, great. So I'm calling on my phone. I apologize, but I do want to approach this discussion looking at Protocol 3, which is to do with culture and cooperation. And that is based on the premise that it's about integration, cultural integration, promoting, protecting cultural content, diversity, and heritage. Now, I am speaking in particular to my experience in animation, in digital media, and in particular to 2 visits that was made to Europe. And I think it will be a good opportunity for persons to hear the difference between 2010 and 2019 with those 2 visits. I think it will be very important data that would help both sides. So my first interaction with EPA and anything to do with EPA was in 2010, when I was invited to the tour of Europe for the creative sector throughout the Caribbean. And at that point, we visited Germany, we visited France, and we visited Liverpool. So I have to tell you that initial first opportunity was definitely a culture shock on our side. And I know for sure it was a culture shock for the European side, which to me, it's okay, because we were now starting that dialogue. But one of the things that stood out in that visit after I did some things where, for instance, Europe and the Caribbean did not share the same pipeline when it comes to animation outsourcing, when it comes to game outsourcing. So that was a big factor that kind of really made me sort of reorganize my approach to that visit in 2010. Of course, also there were some cultural nuances that needed to be kind of ironed out, and that again will take time, and that will take building of networks and building of relationships. And of course, the major challenge was the language, which, you know, when we came as creatives, we knew that was going to be a barrier, but actually being in the space demonstrated it even more. And I do feel that I am thankful for that, because then we were able to come back to the table and kind of readdress and reassess what do we take to the European market. So in that visit in 2010, what we did as creatives, and I personally did as creatives, was to use that visit as a fact-finding visit, as a market research finding visit, as a networking, building of relationships, testing the waters. And one particular visit I made to Xylem Studios in Paris definitely put it into perspective, because there is where I saw that the pipeline was totally not in alignment with what we were doing in the Caribbean. So although nothing tangible came out of that visit, certainly the lessons learned, we were able to apply it to our next visit, which was in 2019. So I just want to talk about that a little bit. Before 2010 and 2019, however, there were a lot of training and exchanges and workshops that came through the European Union funding, where we focused on content development through training workshops. And this came through, of course, Caribbean Export Development Agency, came through CDB, came through even CARICOM, right? Where we focused on content development. But because of our experiences in 2010, we knew we had to really, really look at those cultural nuances in a much different way, because we knew we had to, you know, kind of tweak what we were taking to Europe. So again, it was helpful in really impacting that. And for this visit, which happened in 2019, we were able to take about 12 IPs, 12 projects in developmental stage to Germany. And we met with a lot of organizations, and in particular, we met with Arete France, someone called Audrey Kamgar, who again looked at the content, right? Looked at the content, and though there was some interest, there were still things that we needed to fix. Now, what that means is that the next phase, which is really kind of fine-tuning this catalog of content coming out of the Caribbean, we are able to now, first of all, create trailers once the funding is there, really fine-tune that catalog to fit the European market, because we also had to look at aesthetics, right? Even a simple thing as aesthetics we had to look at, and in a way kind of change our stories to fit within that European context. Not, we still being authentic, but we knew in order to fit into that, we had to amend a few things. So I think it was important to share that before and after, but also to look at what the takeaways were between 2010 and 2019. And these are the specific takeaways I took, which is that this process is not a quick fix. When it comes to animation, digital media, game art, it is not a quick fix. So our visit to Europe and the time between then and now, are you still hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. It's just I'm having technical difficulties. So the time frame between now and then, if we say, okay, that's about 10 years or 12 years or whatever, when you look at the global animation industry, for let's say, for instance, India which is a similar sort of approach to how we do things in the Caribbean when it comes to animation industry. India took 14 years to really move from not having any experience in animation outsourcing to actually becoming a sustainable sector or industry. It took 14 years for that. So I don't think we need to look at this thing as being, okay, 10, 12 years and we don't have anything tangible. We have very intangible things that are very, very valuable. The other thing is that, of course, what we take away is that there are certain cultural nuances that we need to look at. That will take a little more work still, but there is something that I noticed that I think also need to be addressed, is that there were a certain amount of apathy when it comes to us communicating with the European studios. There was that. There was a lot of that in 2010, and there was still that in 2019. So I want to turn that on its head. I want to say to the European studios, what is stopping you from taking advantage of this trade agreement? What is it? We have done the work. We have my business partner, Jason Lindsay, literally went to Europe to try to start that dialogue, right? It's not like we didn't do the work. We have tweaked our stories to fit into your space. We have in Trinidad and Tobago, I could speak of because that's where I'm from, we have around 225 trained students. We have an outsourcing hub that comes under the University of Trinidad and Tobago that was funded by the IDB that is ready for work. We have studios in Trinidad and Tobago, in particular Full Circle Studio, that is outsourcing outside. We have another game outsourcing studio that is outsourcing to outside. So I throw back out the question, what is it that is causing from the European side that this agreement not to work like it should? I have some recommendations, but I'll wait till the end for that.
Well, thank you very much, Camille. Some very valid points and good experience there from the difference in times. What I think I really like and got out of it is the fact that, you know, while they may not be tangible, the intangible is really important. I think that's crucial for us to understand. Without much further ado, because time is of the essence, as we try to wrap up the panel, I'd like to hear from each member just briefly, well, importantly, not as quickly as we can, in terms of the recommendations that we have that could be made going forward for the service sector to tap into the untapped opportunities that present themselves in the economic partnership agreement. So I open the floor to start again with Benedict in terms of how we can tap in.
Thank you. I'll be short. I'll focus on four main points. On the one hand, we believe that the EPA needs to be fully implemented, and for example, advancing the implementation of transparency obligations under the EPA would already help businesses on both sides. The second point is that the implementation bodies under the agreement need to be used more strategically. And that is particularly important for the Committee on Trade and Services. Both sides agreed to establish, but that hasn't been become operational yet. So this committee really needs to become operational as soon as possible, because it could play an essential role in identifying and addressing issues that services providers and investors from both sides are facing. And it could also prepare the ground for the outstanding negotiations to further liberalize investment in trade and services. To ensure that business concerns are addressed through this committee and the review, both sides should also systematically consult their business communities ahead of each meeting of this body. And this will be even more important after the COVID-19 pandemic, which has had a strong negative impact on many services sectors. And it will also be important for keeping the EPA in line with the increasing digitalization of the economy and other megatrends. So that's the second point. The third point is that it's important to overcome the fragmentation of CARIFORUM markets for goods and services. So regional integration is very important in this regard, as this would increase the potential for economies of scale and make the region more attractive to domestic, European and third country investors. And this also means that the EPA regional preference clause needs to be implemented, and of course efforts under the Caribbean single market and economy need to be supported and so on. And final point, EU development policy, including capacity building measures and all other measures under EU development policy, need to be fully harnessed to maximize the benefits of the EPA and Caribbean regional integration. And as you may know, the regional priorities of the EU's external financing instruments are currently being set in the so-called programming phase. And there, we think it's very important that EU delegations in the Caribbean consult local business associations, chambers of commerce to identify priority sectors and measures for that should be taken into account for these regional priorities of the EU external financing instruments for the next 7 years. I'll stop here. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiana. Quickly, can you give us just some recommendations and some tips on tapping untapped opportunities, please?
Yes, I agree with Benedict about having a mechanism. The Committee on Services, of course, would be a good start to map out implementations, how that benefits are going to translate in practical terms, how artists can tap into the provisions of the cultural protocol, look at what the EU has granted to others like Canada and others, and see how can we bridge that gap. There are many changes in technology, the digitalization and all that after we negotiated the EPA, so we have to adjust some of those provisions, look at some of the barriers, new barriers that are coming up, and how do we maintain the preference even in light of some of those barriers. I also agree that we need to look at the cooperation and the support of joint sector developments, looking at key areas which are important for the Caribbean, but also for Europe, innovation area. We may not have many companies, a big critical mass, but we do have companies doing a lot of innovations, registering patents, even in Europe. So, and we need those Caribbean unicorns to be supported and to have a path to be able to be successful and tap into that market. So given all the changes in the post-Cotonou discussion, I would say, how do we have greater access to some of those programs for innovation and collaborations that the EU has, and how can we tap into that? And also maybe rethinking how to have greater access to the part of the European Union that is here in the Caribbean region to foster greater collaborations. There are new mechanisms for cooperation that are being reviewed. So this is a good moment to look at how to make it so that it's easier that we link up better and collaborate better with the Dutch OCTs in the region, as well as the French territory. So I think I just leave it like that, but I think if we do all those steps and support a very comprehensive mapping out the access as well as supporting the sectors, I think we can have a leap into support. And I'm sure the coalition of services throughout the region could play a critical role, both in consultation and in support to these sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiana. Quickly, Karen, in terms of some quick recommendations on how we can tap in on opportunities. I know you alluded to some before, but you could just wrap up with some points for us, please.
Sure, awesome. So I think that Caribbean creatives need to avail themselves of the nature of different European markets. So when, for example, I sat down with one of the bands we work with, Freetown Collective, we actually looked at the EU space and we focused on Germany, France, and Netherlands, for example. And those are the markets in which we got results. I mean, one of our records went gold there and platinum in the Netherlands, gold in France, platinum in the Netherlands. One of the reasons for that is because as a creative, you have limitless potential, limitless ideas, but limited resources. You understand? You don't have all the time in the world to chase every single lead, to write to every single company. You have a limited amount of time and resources. So what you want to do is look at the European space, look at the genre of music that you're producing, if you're into music, and look at the size of that market for that specific genre across the EU. And also, what would be really good for you is to look at the psychographics of your band, as in what does your band stand for, and how does that play into the demographics and the psychographics of the market. So, for example, one of the same bands we talked about, they care about the environment, they care about social issues. That plays really, really well into the demographic that we've targeted in the Netherlands and Germany and France. But if you know that is not necessarily your cup of tea, you have to target a different demographic in that country. Yes, and one of the things I'd say as well is that it doesn't make any sense really trying to target a country. Perhaps you might want to start with just a city in a country, because that's what the different marketing mechanisms, even digital marketing mechanisms and social media, allow you to do. And I think that's what you really want to align yourself with. And finally, what I want to say is this, right? There are real opportunities for us in terms of some of these conferences that actually happen in Europe. WOMEX and MIDEM are two of them, right? And if we are going to go to those things, we need to know that we're not just going there to sell CDs or to tell somebody about our act or to perform. We're going there to do business, which means we have to understand what it means to be a contract service supplier. You need to make sure you avail yourself of the information to understand what it means to be a business service supplier, so you can go over there and negotiate deals. But there's two more things I'd add. One, understand the type of deals that they are interested in, right? Some of these companies are interested in catalog. Some of these countries are interested in music for film. You understand? And if you're going over there, one of the things I would be very, very keen to kind of highlight is that you need to go over with your intellectual property rights sorted before you go. So all of your split agreements, all of your license, all of the agreements that say that everybody that was on the track has signed off, and that the ownership of the track is all signed, and you work with the paperwork showing that, yes, I have all of the ownership documents, and I have also all of the metadata associated with the track. I have all of that, and you can show the person that, yes, here are the signed documents, then you can get a deal. But it does not matter how good your track sounds. If you do not have the rights of it sorted, they will walk, because no one wants to end up in court. You understand? So I think that's really, really important. And then the final thing, of course, is there are opportunities really for us to partner with acts who already have an audience in the EU. And I think that's really, really important. That's what Calypso Rose did in order to break into the French market, because she had a French Trinidadian manager. But that's what we can do as well. No? And seriously, I can't name the band, but I spoke to the manager of a very, very, very big band over in the EU. And what they said was, listen, what happens is that they get smaller acts, and they said they're not going to pay the smaller acts to open for them because they're such a big name. But what they say is, if the smaller acts can work out their own accommodation and work out their own transport to come along with them, they actually get their massive audience by going on tour with them, because they're not going to pay you to open for them because they're such a big name. But we need the support in order to be able to sort out our own accommodation, sort out our own transport, making sure all the visas go through. There's some support that is necessary, but I want to really highlight that the opportunities are there. And I think that's important to end on.
Thank you very much for that, Karen. Thank you very much for that. And I will close. I don't know if Camille is on the phone.
Yes, I'll just quickly close. What Karen said was applied also to the film and animation industry. So there's no need to repeat some of the things he said. But there's some very simple things, like, for instance, the actual agreement itself. If we could find a way to break that up so it's much more, it could be consumed easier, so that when we're speaking with European counterparts, it's not a PDF document that we're sending. And I know we have the websites and we have those kind of things, but I think we need to look at that. We also need to look at those middle agencies to act between, for instance, CEDA and the EU. And I know the CEDA did a good job with that when we went to Europe, by letting certain organizations do the research and try to get the partners that will be suitable to the visit. So that was a very good example of doing that. Definitely there needs to be, contrary to, when we think about the complexity of this, I do believe that this is the time to really push the industry when it comes to animation and games and digital media. I really feel that this is the time. We've done the groundwork. We've done all the things that we need to do. So it's just about aligning the successes, like for instance, Full Circle Animation Studio that is doing outsourcing already, align them to the partners, twin them, as Michael said, to the partners out there so that this conversation could happen in a realistic way. And organizations like the University of Trinidad and Tobago, you also want to twin with institutions that are doing training, with institutions that are doing training in Europe. So those are quickly some of my practical recommendations.
Thank you very much, Camille, and thank you to all my panelists, Benedict, Tiana, Karen, and Camille. Thank you very much. I think we had some very good discussions. Unfortunately, time is not on our side, so I'll now hand over. We'll respond to all the questions that we have in the chat via email, and I will now hand over to our Master of Ceremony, Mr. of Ceremonies. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Alison. I think we had quite a lot of discussions today and presentations. And as we're coming up towards the end and closing, I'd like to invite Adam back to give an overall summary and obviously then also close today's event. So Adam?
Yes, thank you, Joellen. And I will try to be quick as I can see that we have significantly exceeded the time that was foreseen for our webinar. So first of all, I would like to thank consultants and presenters, but also participants who has stayed with us through these prolonged sessions. I guess that we have learned a lot from today's presentations and discussions. So what we have to take from this session is to remember that EPA is an important tool. And as for any tool to deliver, it has to be used. So it has to be used by the private sector and to the benefit of the private sector. Even though it might be not always easy, or not all the aspects of EPA utilization may be straightforward. We need to work to keep EPA utilization constantly improved, and we need to also adjust it to surrounding circumstances. And one of the circumstances is obviously still sadly ongoing COVID-19 pandemics. So just to address or mention one of the efforts that we as the EU, but also together with Caribbean Export, are doing in this regard is increasing our contributions to the private sector development programs that recently in December 2020, we contributed almost 4 million additional 4 million euros for the direct assistance grant scheme that is benefiting SMEs and MSMEs in the region with grants ranging from 5,000 to 15,000 euros. So I would like to finish this session thanking SIDA for very effective and efficient execution of this DAX scheme. We had over 63 companies that were selected under this program. And of course, I wanted also to mention that our, and this time EU efforts, also for better advocacy and strengthening and development of the European VSOs in the region. So now we are working with close cooperation with European chambers present in the region on a program that hopefully will be implemented as of the second part of this year. So once again, thank you all for participation, and we will follow all the questions and the discussions in the exchange by emails. And thank you once again, Sida and Joellen, for excellent conducting of this webinar.
Thank you very much, Adam. And with that, I would like to thank everybody for their attendance and obviously officially close today's session. And obviously, should you need to reach out to Caribbean Export at all, please do visit our website, carib-export.com, where you'll find all of the relevant information and contact details. Many thanks. Have a lovely day.
Thanks to all. Excellent, Joellen. Take care.
Bye, Cyprian.